From X-Men to Dimensional Gods. Chapter 81. Rat-tat-tat. Why did Carl let the zombies get so close before opening fire? The reason is simple. As stated earlier, there are only two reliable ways to kill a zombie. The first is a headshot. It's the most effective method. Destroy the brain and they lose all mobility. Easy to say, but a headshot is brutally hard to pull off. Carl could confidently claim that, among everyone present, only he, except maybe Alice and the newly empowered Jill, could land consistent headshots at such range. To say nothing of the ordinary officers and hobbyist shooters. So the only practical option was method 2. Hose them down with concentrated fire until the bullets' impact literally rips their bodies apart. One of humanity's greatest inventions, the bullet, doesn't just punch a hole, it tears and shreds tissue as it strikes. To maximize that damage you need to let the horde get close. After all, the farther a bullet flies, the slower, less accurate, and weaker it becomes. And neither the Raccoon City Police Department nor any gun shop in town stocked anything heavier. Like the M134 minigun Carl would have killed for. Or tanks and howitzers, those would be nice. With that kind of hardware the zombies might as well be tissue paper. But the fool things weigh tons. Carl's current strength doesn't let him lug around artillery pieces. Right now the square was filled with cops and civilians armed mainly with assault rifles and SMGs, plus a handful of sniper rifles. Aside from the snipers, effective range on those weapons was barely 600 or 700 meters. Carl couldn't waste ammo, so point-blank fire was the most efficient, and cheapest, option. It worked beautifully. Rat-tat-tat. Smoke blanketed the square around the police department. At each of the 3 barricaded roads. No fewer than 50 or 60 shooters stood ready. 50-plus guns roaring together turned anything in front of them into sieves. For over 10 minutes not a single zombie crossed the 250-meter mark, their corpses instead formed a rising barricade of flesh. Hold fire, save your rounds. Single stragglers go to the snipers, bigger groups get the full treatment. Copy that. After that barrage the cops and civilians, first stiff with fear, were suddenly, inexplicably, exhilarated. Am I wrong, or are these things not that scary after all? Same here, and it feels great. Duh, on a range you never get to blast targets this freely. Yeah, range targets don't move, these things do. Any spare sniper rifles? I need practice. Slow, non-dodging zombies made the perfect live fire training dummies. Alright, grab some rest while you can, plenty more fun ahead, though I bet you'll be begging for a break later. The suggestive remark drew a chorus of laughter from every man present. Even Jill and Alice on the other fronts looked bemused, but as time dragged on they realized Carl hadn't joked. They really did start begging for a break, because the monsters just kept coming. In the square in front of Raccoon City Police Department. On the three-way intersection battlefield. They'd fought from dawn until 1830 that afternoon. Countless clashes, large and small, had erupted in between. A wall of zombie corpses now rose dozens of meters along the road. Excitement had long drained from everyone's faces, replaced by exhaustion. Am I seeing things, or do these fools just never run out? Anyone got booze? My throat's on fire. My whole body's gone numb. Only XSTARS operators, forged by special ops training, could endure such long, intense firing. Ordinary cops and civilians had palms swollen and split from recoil. Carl had no fix. Hang in there a bit longer. He urged. Then he turned to the Red Queen. What's the picture now? Any idea how many zombies are still in the city? The screen lit up with her reply. Judging by the past 10 hours, Father, you've already eliminated roughly 90% of them. Good news. Jill, Alice, what's your ammo count? Jill's voice crackled from the walkie. Almost dry. Just checked. We're nearly out. Alice's answer followed. Same here. Carl's brows knitted. Looks like we ration from here. Peyton. Here. It'll be dark soon. Get someone to check power and lights. I'm not fighting blind tonight. On it. Suddenly Kaplan's voice burst in. Oh, no, what the hell is that? What? On the roof of the station, Kaplan lowered his binoculars, lips trembling. In the sky, something's flying this way. Everyone instinctively looked toward the horizon, and felt a chill. Far across from the station, the setting sun silhouetted a massive swarm of black specks that looked like a storm cloud rolling in. God! What is that? Too distant to see clearly, yet close enough to unsettle every soul present. Then the Red Queen spoke. They're zombie crows. What? An early Umbrella Corporation T-virus experiment. At first the virus wasn't tested on humans, cost and tech dictated animals and plants. But the subjects proved uncontrollable and far more savage. Labeled failures, they were sealed beneath Umbrella's Raccoon HQ, until now. Their release means more monsters are coming, right? Carl's voice cut across the square. Yes, father. Those fools. Jill looked ready to explode. Carl barked orders. Jill, Alice, get everyone inside and seal every window and vent these crows could squeeze through, then report to me. Roger. Carl shouted to the cops and civilians. Move, back inside, weapons with you. Seeing the sky-blackening swarm of undead crows, the officers and townspeople fled into the building without hesitation. Moments later the square stood empty. Jill and Alice sprinted over, and Carl handed each of them an RPG launcher. Know how to use it. Of course the two of them knew how to use them. Jill had trained with Delta Force, and Alice had gone through every special course Umbrella Corporation offered. Firing an RPG was child's play. They each took one. Alice hefted it, perfect balance. Jill asked, what's the plan? Those zombie crows are flying too high and moving way faster than the shambling dead. If we let everyone shoot, it's just wasted ammo. Only the three of us can draw their attention. We make them come after us, no matter what. They cannot be allowed past us into the station, or everything we've done today is for nothing. Jill and Alice both nodded, understanding clear in their eyes. Ready? Yeah. Then let's give them something to remember. Side by side, 30 meters apart, they shouldered the launchers. As the black cloud of crows bore down, they squeezed the triggers. White smoke trails lanced into the swarm. Boom. 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 Blasts blossomed into fireballs, shrapnel turned white-hot and scythed the zombie crows from the sky. Caw caw caw. T-virus infection had stripped the crows of fear, gunfire only enraged them. Banking as one, they spiraled above Carl, Jill and Alice, then dived like a black waterfall. Back to back the three stood. Gun in the right hand, cold steel in the left. Carl and Jill carried adamantium blades, Alice wore steel claws. Let's paint the plaza red. My God. Are they even human? Don't tell me they're Jedi with the Force. From the windows of Raccoon City Police Department came gasps of disbelief as the trio below carved through the murder of undead crows. It looked hopeless, thousands of flapping corpses raining from the sky. Yet the impossible happened. Standing in a tight triangle, Carl, Jill and Alice cut the crows down like raindrops, not one getting through. Guns and blades wove a perfect duet. The two knives and the claws flashed with impossible lethality. Spectators were reminded of last year's blockbuster, The Jedi Knights of Star Wars. Some swore Carl outshone even Master Yoda. His blade danced so fast it became a silver sphere, beautiful and deadly. At the infirmary window of Raccoon City Police Department, Rain, guarding Dr. Ashford, stared in stunned confusion. She finally understood why Carl called Alice special. Beside Alice's combat reflexes, even her own hard-earned skills felt ordinary. No wonder Carl had carved through the hive's horde single-handedly to save them. But when had Jill become this formidable? She was certain that, until today, STARS member Jill had been her equal. Training had made them stronger than most, but not superhuman. Could it be? In a building opposite the station, a short-haired woman in a fitted trench coat watched, equally surprised. Now she understood why Wesker had sent her to Raccoon to investigate this man. Alice's power was expected, she knew more about Project Alice than most. But this man, and more importantly Ms. Jill Valentine. She was positive Jill wasn't a T-virus mutant. No records showed infection granting power without grotesque mutation. Yet Jill now wielded superhuman strength. Only one explanation: the man had given it to her. A terrifying prospect. Umbrella had chased that dream for decades without success. Yes, there were prototypes, her boss, Alice, but the survival rate was 1 in a million, and failure meant becoming a monster. Jill, however, remained flawlessly beautiful. Interesting, I'll have to take a risk. A faint crack made her turn, her face tightened. They released even that thing. Time to move. She melted into shadow. Sensing the crow numbers thinning, Carl allowed himself a thin sigh of relief. He never feared the crows. With his reflexes, slicing bullets was easy. The crows were a nuisance, nothing more, yet he couldn't relax. Something was wrong. First, zombie crows had never appeared in Raccoon in the original timeline. Second, Red Queen had just confirmed they'd been released deliberately. Which meant worse monsters, absent from the script, were coming. Then Red Queen's voice filled his earpiece. Father, Hunter Alpha detected 1 kilometer out. With Red Queen's warning, Carl, the strongest of the trio, was first to spot the creatures clinging to a distant building wall. Half human, half lizard monstrosities wrapped in green scales, sporting long tails and razor claws like Spider-Man's lizard doctor. The zombie crows overhead seemed to sense the creatures' arrival and scattered in panic, giving the trio a moment's respite. Jill and Alice also caught sight of the monsters. What the hell are these things now? Jill couldn't help swearing again. Red Queen's little girl voice chimed in. Hunter Alpha, one of Umbrella Corporation's mid-stage research projects. By fusing human and reptile embryos with the T-virus, they created monsters as agile as reptiles, immensely strong, highly aggressive, and capable of regenerating severed limbs at terrifying speed. However, after an uncontrollable incident caused massive casualties, Umbrella sealed the project and cryogenically stored the remaining specimens. How many of these things did Umbrella cook up in Raccoon City? Red Queen answered playfully. A lot, but luckily, only 5 Hunter Alphas were cryo-stored here. Alice, feeling the overwhelming pressure from the towering creature leaping between buildings, asked. Any advice on killing them? Theoretically, Hunter Alpha resembles Nemesis, only faster and uncontrollable. Their armor is weaker, and they can't use human weapons. Carl understood immediately. Vaccine. Inside the hive, I killed Nemesis with the T-virus vaccine. We have blades that slice their skin. Inject the vaccine, their regenerating muscles shred it, letting the antidote flood their system and kill them. Jill and Alice's eyes lit up. Red Queen praised. Brilliant idea. Carl pulled 2 vaccine doses from his pocket. Even with the automated machine, production was slow. Overnight, fewer than 100 doses were made. Jill and Alice each carried only 1 spare dose. Take them, more chances. I've got more. Jill and Alice didn't hesitate, grabbing the vials. Carl turned toward the approaching Hunter Alphas. Only 5 hunters, 1 each, the last 3 are mine. Deal. Jill and Alice nodded gravely. Deal. Leave it to us. Then let's go. The trio split up instantly, charging the hunters. The Hunter Alpha perched on the opposite building roared hideously and pounced. Carl was fastest. Jill took the left, Alice the right. He drew his pistol, firing 1 shot into each of the 3 nearest hunters' heads. Bang bang bang. The 3 hunters aggro locked onto him. Jill and Alice smoothly peeled off their own bosses. Despite a full day of combat, Carl felt no fatigue. He had no intention of dragging the fight out, he needed to conserve stamina. No telling what enemies might appear next. So this time, he got a little serious. Up to now, Carl had held back, full strength was simply too astonishing. After watching too many Marvel superheroes, people underestimate 5 tons of force, still imagining fistfights, but in reality, it's devastating. Unsuppressed, Carl could leap from the 1st to the 10th floor, concrete walls might as well be paper, and he could outrun any human. But that was only the basics. His so-called 5-ton limit meant he could overhead press 5 tons max. But combat isn't weightlifting. Human fighting techniques let Carl burst beyond 5 tons. Everyone knows it. Speed equals power. A 1-ton sedan at highway speed hits with far more than 1 ton of force. That's why Captain America can stand toe-to-toe despite modest raw strength. Skill amplifies it. So Carl simply burst forward, closing on the 3 lizard monsters. The lead green lizard slashed with half-meter claws. Carl sidestepped, snatched the lizard's tail mid-pass, and swung the creature like a flail into the other 2 hunters. Boom. The 2 hunters were smashed aside, vomiting blood. Carl slammed the remaining hunter into the floor, cracking the concrete. Without hesitation, he plunged his Edmund alloy knife into the green lizard's skull, pinning it down, then stuffed a vaccine dose into its drooling maw. The green lizard convulsed, its body collapsing into a pool of reeking sludge like nemesis. Carl yanked his blade free and advanced on the last two monsters. From a distant rooftop, a woman with binoculars stared in shock. Is that guy even human? As an agent under Wesker, Ada Wong knows just how terrifying these monsters are. Why was the test subject that caused such huge losses to Umbrella Corporation, Hunter Alpha, not completely destroyed, but instead frozen and sealed away? Because the value of Hunter Alpha as a bioweapon was too alluring to Umbrella's higher-ups. Let me put it this way. According to Umbrella's tests, at least a 6-person elite squad equipped with heavy weapons is needed to take down a single Hunter Alpha. How much does it cost to cultivate a Hunter Alpha? It's about the same as raising a pet, except this pet eats a lot. The value is obvious. But now, this incredibly powerful monster was easily dealt with by that mysterious man. No, not just one, the other two were the same. In barely a moment, the man dispatched them with 3 swift blows. In stark contrast stood Alice and Ms. Jill. Although they displayed superhuman strength at that moment, when faced with such agile and heavily defended monsters, they still seemed outmatched, unwilling to directly clash with Hunter Alpha, and could only rely on their agility and sharp weapons to finish them off. This finally made Ada realize why Wesker cared so much about the weapon the man wielded. You have to know that while Hunter Alpha's outer scales aren't enough to make it impervious to swords and spears, ordinary rifle bullets are also ineffective. Yet those sturdy scale armor become as fragile as paper against those 4 weapons. This man truly harbors many secrets. At that moment, a resonant howl rang out, shaking the battlefield once again. In front of the Raccoon City Police Department, Jill pulled her long sword from a corpse that had turned into a disgusting pool of pus. The 3 of them regrouped. However, Alice could clearly sense Jill's gaze lingering on the steel claws on her arm and on Carl beside her, as if she were catching them in the act. She of course knew why, but she had no intention of explaining. After all, it was amusing, wasn't it? Carl also felt Jill's stare, put on a flattering expression, and was about to say something. Suddenly, the ground trembled and a resonant howl echoed. Everyone turned their heads, their faces changing. On the wide street ahead, a terrifying giant beast appeared at each of the 3 intersections. A massive, 1 meter wide, dozens of meters long giant python, its body oozing green slime like a train, squeezed everything in its path, making crackling sounds. A colossal elephant, its flesh split, ivory cracked, eyes blood red, let out a terrifying roar that chilled everyone to the bone. A lion the size of a compact car, its flesh burst open to reveal bulging crimson muscle, with 2 smaller female lions behind it. All shared the same trait. Rotting skin, blood everywhere, exposing strong muscle tissue. A hint of fear flashed across Alice's face as she swore for the first time. Did we just poke a zoo's den? Jill clenched her fists and shouted angrily. It's Oscar and Max. What? Upon hearing that, Carl and Alice were both completely baffled. Jill angrily pointed at the zombie elephant and zombie lion. They are Oscar and Max, the star animals of our Raccoon City Zoo. A month ago I even fed them. How did they become like this? Back then they weren't this huge. Red Queen's lowly voice chimed in. After Umbrella's research on animals, the T-virus, once it infects an animal, rapidly boosts its metabolism, causing its size and strength to increase dramatically in a short time. Under hunger, they also become extremely ferocious. So what's up with that snake? That was also one of Umbrella's early animal experiment products, later kept in the hive's sewers to handle failed experiments. Shit, what do we do now? Jill's gaze involuntarily drifted to Carl. At that moment, even Jill lost confidence facing such massive monsters. Alice's eyes also became extremely cautious. These 3 monsters were nothing like the crows and lizard people they'd just faced. Carl wasn't too panicked and asked after a moment. Doctor, any suggestions? Ashford's voice quickly sounded from the remote. Honestly, I don't have any, but you could try this. Most of these animals have a strong sense of territory. Upon hearing that, the 3 lit up. Carl wasted no time and said, I'll lure the python, Jill you lure the lion, Alice you lure the elephant. Don't get stuck in a prolonged fight, just draw them toward me. Got it. The 3 sprang into action. There was no time, the 3 beasts were about to charge the police station building. Carl, While firing at the giant python on the road, asked the remote. Kaplan, I remember you said you're the bomb specialist. Yes, what about it? Now, go find Peyton immediately. I recall the police station still has a lot of high explosive dynamite. I need you to make a few bombs that can blow these monsters away in one go, okay? No problem, I'm on it. At that moment, Carl reached the python, drew his gun without hesitation, and fired, aiming for its eye. Bang! The first shot hit cleanly. Because the creature didn't even notice Carl charging at it, it didn't know how many meals like this it had eaten. And its massive size made its eye an even bigger natural target. But a wave of intense pain struck, one eye was destroyed, and the python finally went berserk. Rumble. The excruciating pain made the massive python thrash wildly, shaking the ground as if a monster had arrived, sending nearby cars, streetlights flying, and scattering the zombie corpses beneath it. Carl didn't retreat. Instead, using his reflexes, he swiftly attacked the other side of the python, targeting its other eye. Only then could the three beasts truly clash. Without eyes, the python could only rely on smell and hearing. Strange, indeed. Logically, with their regenerative abilities, healing an eye should be easy. But surprisingly, Carl observed for a while and saw no sign of regeneration. That was good news. So, while the python was raging, Carl quickly moved to the other side. He aimed at the other fist-sized eye and fired. Bang! Given Carl's current physique, despite the python's head jerking from the pain, he still seized the chance and hit the eye. Just as he thought his target was achieved, the python's flesh on top split open, revealing a blood-soaked massive eyeball. Those suddenly appearing Kazi-Lan big eyes stunned Carl. Carl was of course not unfamiliar with this scene. After all, such a scene often appears in games, but isn't this the movie universe? And at that moment, the Red Queen's lowly voice also rang out. This is a secondary infection. Secondary infection. Carl dodged the raging giant python while asking. Yes, the sign of secondary infection is gaining self-evolution abilities, just like the lickers. This python was kept in the hive's sewers, fed countless failed test subjects, and now its eyes are the mark of evolution. Carl looked up at the massive eye on the python's head and immediately understood the Red Queen's meaning. Because at this moment, the eye on the zombie python's head was not a reptilian vertical pupil but a human eye. Just then, roars of a lion and an elephant echoed behind him. He turned and saw Jill and Alice running toward him, with two zombie beasts wildly pursuing them. Human eyes. Thinking of that, Carl instantly came up with a plan. He swiftly evaded the recovering python, slipped past its crushing body, pulled out a flashbang, removed the fuse, timed it, and tossed it at the python's head. Boom! The dazzling flash and high-frequency sound once again caused the zombie python pain. Seizing the chance, he fled toward Alice and Jill, tossing a smoke grenade as he ran. Quick! Run inside! Jill and Alice instantly understood Carl's intention. The two plunged into the white smoke. Among the pursuing zombie beasts, the lion and the lioness seemed slightly smarter and slowed down, but the massive zombie elephant, as sturdy as a locomotive, didn't care and charged straight in. Boom! A violent crash rang out, accompanied by the roars of the two beasts. Carl had already grabbed Jill and Alice and hidden them in a side alley. What do we do now? Let them fight for a while, then we'll check how Kaplan's bombs are doing. Okay. The three immediately slipped through the alley, avoided the beasts' sight, and ran toward the police department building. At that moment, the white smoke from the smoke bomb quickly dissipated. In front of the Raccoon City Police Department building, the three zombie beasts roared at each other across the street. Clearly the earlier collision had badly injured both the zombie elephant and the python. The python's body bore a gaping wound that revealed crimson flesh, rapidly healing, while the elephant's tusk broke, but a new tusk quickly sprouted, forming a forked, terrifying weapon. SS's. Rumble rumble. Among the three beasts, the python and the lion seemed smarter. Even under T-virus control they were ferocious, but they dared not act rashly against equally strong opponents. The zombie elephant, however, cared nothing and charged at the python with its head held high. Boom! The zombie python retaliated, lifting its head to grapple the elephant. Seeing this, the lion held back, snarling and issuing commands to the lioness behind it. The three lions instantly surrounded the two battling beasts, forming a triangular encirclement. Meanwhile, Carl, Jill, and Alice had already slipped behind the three beasts and arrived at the police department building. Kaplan, how's the preparation going? At the building's entrance, crowded with tense police, Kaplan and Peyton led a group carrying three large bags out. Kaplan could hardly wait and said, I've collected all the TNT in Raccoon City, half a ton. I divided it into 100 packs, each 5 kilogram. One pack explodes with 5 times the power of a standard grenade, enough to kill an elephant. If we throw them together, we could wipe out an entire street. Everyone's eyes lit up. With these bombs, they weren't afraid of the 3 giant zombie beasts on the distant street, let alone a few more. Well done, Jill. You and Kaplan are bomb experts. Place these bombs on the front line. Next, we'll blast those 3 monsters into mush. Okay. Jill, who excelled at this, immediately nodded. Everyone sprang into action. Meanwhile, under the cover of night, the UBCS team led by Carlos slipped past the Red Queen's reconnaissance and slowly approached the police department building. What kind of monster is that? At that moment, the team members also saw the 3 beasts battling on the field. As members of the UBCS team, Carlos and his men knew some Umbrella Corporation secrets, biochemical experiments and the zombies and monsters, but they had never seen such terrifying beasts before. Carlos hesitated a bit, but he remembered his mission. Keep it quiet, remember our mission, only drive is left. Also, hide yourselves so the Red Queen won't find us. Understood. It should be noted that the police department was once moved to the museum with Umbrella Corporation's funding, so they knew the building's layout well and entered through a secret ventilation shaft. At that time, under the night's cover, the police, led by Jill and Kaplan, used a 1-meter-high wall of piled zombie corpses as cover and set the bombs below. In the dark street far away, the 3 beasts were already locked in a frenzied fight. Even the lion joined the battle, because the zombie python had evolved sharp claws from the torn skin where its tusk had ripped, turning from a snake into a lizard, which put the previously evenly matched zombie elephant at a disadvantage. Perhaps due to former comradeship, or because the zombie lion thought that if the elephant lost it would gain nothing, it brought 2 lionesses into the fight to help the elephant and try to kill the python. Got it. Okay. Jill and Kaplan returned to Carl's side and rejoined the front line. Next, we need to lure them in. Carl said, pointing the remote in his hand. Peyton, are you ready? Ready. Then let's begin. Okay. With a click, 2 massive searchlights blazed on the dark street, illuminating the 3 battling beasts, and the silhouettes of Carl's group appeared. Open fire. Everyone instantly spewed flames. The 3 beasts went completely berserk, no longer fighting each other, and charged at Carl's group with roars. Fall back. Carl followed the plan, leading everyone toward the building. Just as the group reached the building, the monsters arrived at the trap's edge. Without hesitation, Jill pressed the detonator in her hand. Die, monsters. Boom. What happens when half a ton of TNT detonates? The entire street in front of Raccoon City Police Department was instantly swallowed by a ball of fire. The blast obliterated everything around it, toppled the buildings lining both sides of the road, shook the ground, and sent a mushroom cloud into the sky. Even the glass in the police department shattered from the aftershock, and cracks snaked across the walls. Fortunately, no one was hurt, everyone had been prepared. Strictly speaking, wasting explosives like this was reckless. What if more monsters showed up? But who knew how strong their regeneration might be? If the blast didn't finish them off. After 5 or 6 minutes, the people crouched behind the walls slowly raised their heads and peered out the windows. The dark street was empty of any living thing. Are they dead? No one knew. Carl could only turn to Peyton and ask. Peyton, can the lights still work? No problem, give me a second. A few seconds later the 2 big roof-mounted searchlights flared back to life and swept the street. Everyone exhaled in relief. Out on the road the 3 colossal beasts had vanished, only a few charred scraps remained. If something could regenerate from that, it would be downright unfair. The blast had wiped the street clean. Phew, we can finally breathe. The moment Carl said that, every officer in the hall relaxed and broke into cheers. So, did we win? One officer asked. I'll get Red Queen to check first. Everyone, grab some rest while you can. 6 drones zipped out through the windows as the crowd began to disperse. Jill exhaled, then gave Carl a dazzling look and asked, "If we've really won, what will you do next?" That gaze was hard for Carl to withstand. Seeing this, Alice tactfully said, "I'll go freshen up." Once everyone had left them alone, Carl finally answered, "Let's go to the room." A short while later, the two of them were in a familiar room, the director's office. The director himself had been returned to where he belonged, a jail cell. As soon as the door closed, Carl set Red Queen's remote aside and pulled Jill into his arms. Though sudden, Jill offered no resistance. They held each other for 2 or 3 minutes before slowly parting, and Carl looked into her bright eyes and said, "Remember the gift I gave you?" Sensing what was coming, Jill nodded. Carl raised his hand. Above his palm floated a pale blue orb wrapped in gold-red energy. Though she had seen it before, Jill was still stunned. She clearly remembered how, last night, Carl had opened this mysterious, beautiful orb and let the gold-red energy flow into her body. In that instant she had felt stronger than ever before. That was the gift Carl had given her. But at the time he hadn't told her what the energy actually was. Could he be about to explain now? Jill's guess was right. At last Carl intended to reveal something. He had realized the world had become unfamiliar. By rights this should be the straightforward Resident Evil film universe, and the plot had matched, yet some of the monsters were clearly not from the movies. Hunter Alpha, the zombie python, and the 2-star animals from Raccoon City Zoo, for example. Although Carl didn't know exactly why, he had a few theories. So he planned some tests and, at the same time, prepared an excuse for any powers he might have to display. That didn't mean he intended to tell the whole truth. Sometimes the truth is cruel. Carl had thought of a better story, one that fit what everyone in this world wanted to believe, an idea that had come to him suddenly down in the hive. "Jill, before I give you the final answer, I have to tell you something, about where I come from, for instance." Jill looked flustered, but she forced herself to stay calm and gave a strained smile. "You're not going to say you're actually a bad guy working for Umbrella Corporation, are you?" Carl was momentarily speechless. He hadn't expected her to joke at a time like this. "Of course not. But the real answer might shock you." Under her anxious gaze, Carl spoke slowly. "Actually, I'm from the future." Yes, Carl was borrowing the premise of the Terminator. "What?" As expected, Jill was dumbfounded. She had imagined many possible answers, but never this one. Her brain could barely process it. Fortunately, Carl already had a perfect backstory ready. "I come from the year 2029, 31 years from now. In our time, because of everything Umbrella Corporation did, the whole Earth became a playground for zombies, even the White House fell." Jill still looked adorably dazed. "All the high-tech gear I brought is from 2099. And this miraculous energy of yours." Carl nodded and explained. "Yes. The reason is simple, though I hate to admit it, everything centers on the T-virus." "The T-virus?" Jill gasped. "Exactly. The T-virus isn't as simple as we thought. It has a special ability. It can evolve humans, but the cost is billions of innocent lives." Jill's pupils contracted sharply. Seeing she was starting to believe the lie, Carl piled on more weight. "Know why I treat Alice so specially? Because she's the key. She's unique. According to future records, she was the first human to evolve successfully, to gain immunity and superpowers from the T-virus. I even suspect the outbreak in Raccoon City was deliberately arranged to make that happen." For a moment Jill's mind felt completely overloaded. I. She wanted to ask something but didn't know where to begin. Everything Carl had said was simply too much to take in. Seeing this, Carl held her tightly and then spoke gently. "Only after telling you all this can I answer the question you asked me earlier. The answer is." Under her gaze, Carl looked into her captivating eyes and said, "Would you mind having a husband who's 31 years younger than you?" At that instant Jill's chaotic mind suddenly cleared under the impact of the question. Right. Nothing else mattered. The answer she wanted had been given. "Then would you be willing to marry a woman 30 years older than you?" "Absolutely." The instant the decisive word left his lips, Carl kissed her, and Jill responded with equal passion. But just as the intimate atmosphere reached its peak and they were about to go further, 2 gunshots suddenly rang out and shattered everything. Doctor's room. Both snapped awake at once, grabbed their weapons, and bolted for Dr. Ashford's room. Alice, Kaplan, Peyton, and the rest followed right behind. The moment they burst in, everyone raised their guns at the strangers inside. 2 bodies lay on the floor. No, Carl, think of something. The doctor's been shot. Rain pressed both hands to Dr. Ashford's bullet-torn chest. Blood was everywhere. Angela sobbed, draped across her father. In truth, the shock wasn't one-sided. Carlos, leader of the 6-man squad, stood stunned. He hadn't even resisted when they stripped his weapon. Carl acted instantly. Jill, get everyone out except Angela. I'm going to try first aid. Jill understood at once. Carl meant to use his uncanny power to save the doctor. Come on, move. Puzzled, the others obeyed and filed out. In seconds only Carl, Angela, and the barely breathing Dr. Ashford remained. Angela looked at Carl through a mask of tears. You can save Dad, right? I don't know, but I'll try. Outside the room, everyone wore panic on their faces. They knew Dr. Ashford's worth. He was the only one here who could make a vaccine. Rain stared at her blood-covered hands, then seized Carlos in fury. I'll kill you. Carlos didn't fight back. He let Rain pummel him. The other UBCS troopers were seized as well. What the hell happened? Alice, the calmest, asked. Jill pulled the enraged Rain back and soothed her. From Rain's account everyone finally learned the story. Moments earlier she'd heard knocking. Thinking nothing of it, this was inside the police department, she opened the door to UBCS operatives who instantly disarmed her. They said Kane had ordered them to take Dr. Ashford away. Then the unthinkable happened. One UBCS soldier suddenly raised his pistol at the doctor. Captain Carlos reacted, but too late, the bullet slammed into the doctor's chest. When Carlos, stunned, asked why, the gunman spoke a single sentence, then put the barrel in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Sorry, Captain, I had no choice. None of us are getting out anyway. The 5 remaining UBCS troopers stood dumbstruck. That was when the others burst in and disarmed the unprepared squad. Alice sensed something uneasy. She grabbed the bewildered Carlos by the collar. What did he mean? None of us are getting out. Then they heard words that drained every face of color. In 3 hours a tactical nuke will launch from a Florida base and reduce Raccoon City to rubble in under 5 minutes. Every eye widened in disbelief. You're kidding, how could they? There are still people here. Nobody even told us. I'm calling command. Won't help. The umbrella corporations jammed every frequency in Raccoon City. 3 hours left, let's run. We can still make it out. Why yeah, we can still. A strange woman's voice cut through the panic. It may already be too late. The sudden words snapped every head toward the corridor where a short-haired woman in a trench coat strolled into view. Everyone tensed. Jill and Alice stepped forward. Who are you, and what do you mean? Me. Call me Ada Wong. Names don't matter, what does is? Unruffled by their hostility, she glanced at her watch. It's 7:12. That means you have 48 minutes to evacuate everyone from Raccoon City. My intel says the strike comes 2 hours earlier than he claimed. Everyone flinched. Carlos's face twisted in realization. He finally understood his dead teammates' words. None of us are getting out. It's a trap. They never meant to extract us. They only wanted us to confirm the doctor's death. Bingo. Ada Wong arched a brow and smiled languidly. Rage flooded Jill's brain. She'd fought to save Raccoon City, to bring everything under control, yet this nuke told her it had all been for nothing. Alice kept her cool. So, Ms. Ada, why are you here? Surely not just to deliver bad news. Of course not. Ada Wong's gaze settled on the 2 women. 2 objectives. First, my boss wants the material of those weapons you're carrying. Second, he's interested in the man inside that room. Right now, though, Ms. Jill, I'm rather interested in you. Jill instantly leveled her gun at Ada. Then tell us, who is this boss of yours? Ada Wong's expression never changed. No comment. Then don't blame my trigger finger. Jill thumbed off the safety, a hair's breadth from firing. The air crackled with tension. A sudden click, the door behind them opened. Hands streaked with blood, Carl stepped out, eyeing the familiar Asian face. What's the blast radius of that nuke? Everyone fell silent. Clearly he'd heard everything inside. Ada Wong studied him with interest. I get your point, but even a low-yield hydrogen bomb carries 30 tons of TNT equivalent. Unless you can move everyone at least 10 kilometers from Raccoon City in the next 45 minutes now, no one survives. 10 kilometers. A shudder ran through the group. By car 10 kilometers was nothing, even 30 minutes would suffice, but there weren't enough vehicles, and most of the survivors were elderly. Organizing them would be nearly impossible. As despair took hold, Carl's calm voice cut through. We don't have time to waste. Kaplan, go to the central station immediately and get everything ready. Alice, Rain, you two are responsible for protecting and evacuating the people in the police department, prioritizing the elderly, women, and children. Let them take the train first. Peyton, immediately mobilize everyone in the police department to find as many working cars as possible in the surrounding area. You have 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, no matter what, we're leaving directly. No problem. The originally chaotic crowd suddenly had a backbone and immediately sprang into action. You're Carlos, right? Carl looked at the man sitting on the ground, disheartened and tied up. He swung his knife, releasing him from his restraints. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. If you still have a conscience, then now, immediately, take your people and go help, do everything you can. Carlos looked at Carl in front of him with some surprise, then finally nodded seriously. I understand. Follow me. Instantly, the entire police department building became noisy, but at the entrance to the second floor, only Carl, Ms. Jill, and Ada Wong remained. Ms. Jill looked at the woman warily, then anxiously said to Carl. Is there anything I can do? Of course. Follow me. Carl led Ms. Jill directly into the medical room and closed the door, which surprised Ada Wong outside the door. It was the first time she had been ignored by a man like this. However, she didn't waste any time. After all, she also needed to escape for her life. Inside the Raccoon City Police Department's medical room, Ms. Jill, walking in, saw Dr. Ashford, resurrected from the dead. A trace of surprise flashed across her face, but at the same time, she let out a long sigh of relief in her heart. Doctor, how do you feel? Dr. Ashford, holding his daughter, also looked incredulous. I've never felt better. In fact, I can feel my legs again. Carl, how did you do it? Carl shook his head. Sorry, doctor, I'd love to explain, but we don't have time now. No time. Dr. Ashford, who had just woken up, didn't know what had happened. Seeing this, Ms. Jill anxiously explained. In less than 45 minutes, a nuclear bomb will be aimed at Raccoon City. What? Dr. Ashford was also shocked, then looked at Carl, and asked, understanding something. Is there anything I can do? Carl didn't waste time and asked directly. Doctor, if I have a miraculous ability that can directly transfer this nuclear bomb to another place far from Raccoon City, but I need to be in close proximity, how should I do it? At this moment, Ms. Jill and Dr. Ashford in the room both widened their eyes, looking at Carl incredulously. Dr. Ashford reacted the fastest. After the shock, he immediately said, Angela, bring Daddy's computer over. Angela immediately ran over and brought the computer from the desk. Dr. Ashford opened it and immediately typed rapidly on the keyboard, then looked at Carl and said, There's a problem now. I need the orbital parameters of this nuclear bomb. Only then can I perform calculations. Carl spoke without wasting a moment. Red Queen, give me the data I need. The screen on Carl's arm lit up, and Red Queen's voice sounded. Sorry, Father, I don't have the data you need. Carl, however, said indifferently. Lying is not what good children do. But I'm not a good child, I'm a bad girl. Carl and Red Queen's sudden, inexplicable conversation made the other two in the room pause, but Dr. Ashford quickly understood and was startled. Carl, in turn, asked. Then do you want to be a good child? After a moment of silence, Red Queen finally spoke. You win, Father. The parameters of this nuclear bomb are, target Raccoon City Police Department. Seeing this, Ms. Jill finally reacted. Was Red Queen actually a spy? But she also knew that time was tight, and she didn't want to disturb anyone present. Finally, with Red Queen's parameters, after 5 minutes of calculations by Dr. Ashford, he came up with a result. Theoretically, it's possible. Doctor, please be brief. The trajectory of this hydrogen bomb is a parabola. If you want to get close to it and transfer it before it detonates, there's only one way. At this point, Dr. Ashford seemed to suddenly think of something and asked, "Can you fly?" "No." Carl answered straightforwardly. "Then there's only this one method of mine. Fly a helicopter to an altitude of 3,000 meters and wait for it on its descending trajectory. At that time, this hydrogen bomb's speed will reach twice the speed of sound, which means you'll only have 5 seconds. No problem." "Oh, right." Carl suddenly thought of something and asked, "If, and I mean if, I can make this nuclear bomb keep flying, how long can its explosion be delayed?" "This nuclear bomb has a timer. A maximum of 30 seconds. Carl asked this because he thought of the scene in Avengers, where Iron Man carried a nuclear bomb into the sky. "Then where do you plan to transfer this nuclear bomb?" Carl gave his intended target. "The hive." Dr. Ashford's eyes lit up and he said, "Good choice. In that case." He used the computer to calculate again. "The hive's location is 7 kilometers from the police department. In that case, the blast radius will shift. Theoretically, as long as we leave Raccoon City, we can reach a relatively safe distance." Carl nodded. "Then it's settled." At this moment, Ms. Jill couldn't help but ask, "Is it really okay for us to be discussing this here?" Everyone followed Ms. Jill's gaze and knew she was referring to Red Queen. "Don't worry, Ms. Jill." Red Queen's lowly voice sounded. "The internal struggles within the Umbrella Corporation are much more severe than you imagine. At least, at this moment, our goals are consistent." "You scoundrel!" Ms. Jill roared, but Carl reached out and stopped her. "Don't get angry with a child, Ms. Jill. Take Dr. Ashford and Angela, we need to go." On the outskirts of Raccoon City, in the military tent at Meishan Bridge. Kane looked at the static-filled screen, speechless for a long time. The massive explosion just now not only killed the 3 giant beasts but also destroyed all surrounding monitoring equipment, causing Kane to instantly lose surveillance of Raccoon City. "How much longer until it's repaired?" A soldier beside him answered nervously. "Sorry, Colonel Kane, unless we send people into Raccoon City, we can't do anything." Kane slammed his fist on the table, recalling the recent battle between Carl, Ms. Jill, Alice, and other zombies, his eyes revealing endless greed. No wonder Ms. Alicia cared so much about that man. That kind of power could not possibly be possessed by humans, and those weapons. However, thinking of the nuclear bomb's arrival in a little over 2 hours, he hesitated again. "How much time do we have left?" The soldier looked at the time on the computer and replied, 2 hours and 25 minutes. Speaking of which, the soldier also hesitated for a moment and asked, "Should we retreat, Colonel Kane?" "Retreat? No." Kane ultimately couldn't suppress his greed and said, "Send Nemesis. You must capture that man for me. Remember, alive." "Yes." But just then, suddenly, a soldier ran in. "Colonel Kane, you might want to come out and see, many cars are heading this way." When Kane followed the soldier out of the tent and onto the wall-like blockade, he saw, sure enough, countless car headlights racing through the dark toward them along Raccoon City's streets, packed so densely they lit the whole city. Seeing this, Kane guessed what was happening. "Looks like they've found out too, huh? This might be an opportunity." With that thought, Kane smiled and gave the order. "Seal the gate. No car passes without my word. Anyone who steps over dies. Open fire." The soldiers hesitated, but obeyed. Soon, car after car reached the bridge. Just as Kane expected, the driver's shouts told him the nuclear bomb secret was out. "Open up. We don't want to die here. You'd use a nuke. I'll sue." "Open the gate, out of time." Kane watched with interest, chin in hand. A sudden insight struck him. With all these ordinary lives in his grasp, who needed Nemesis? Once he captured that man, learned the secret of his body, and seized that mighty power, he might not even have to answer to Ms. Alicia anymore. Below, the line of cars now stretched a full kilometer. At that moment Kane felt he held everyone's fate in his palm. But while he dreamed of that bright future, a red flash streaked past, his world turned scarlet, then a scream beside him. "Look out." Too late. A crack rang out and Kane's world went black. His brain was still wrapped in that sweet fantasy. The sudden gunshot stunned everyone. They saw Kane atop the wall, head split open, topple stiffly. No one had imagined the man who secretly ruled Raccoon City and Umbrella Corporation would die like this. Almost casually. Still, the crack sent the guards diving for cover, rifles ready. Then a booming voice tore through the night. Kane is dead. Open the gate. Now. You know about the nuke, but you were lied to. Less than 20 minutes and it'll be overhead. Run while you can. No need to die for a corpse. The words startled every soldier on the wall. They looked at one another. You get 5 seconds. Gate stays shut. I blow it with an RPG. 5, 4. Before 3, the barred gate lurched open. Everyone out. Rendezvous at the next station. Your parents and kids are waiting there. Boom. Engines roared as cars sped out of the city, tires smoking. Beside the road, inside a sedan, Jill drove while Dr. Ashford and his daughter sat in back. Carl in the passenger seat looked at Jill and spoke slowly. You should leave too. The car fell silent. From the back, Angela asked the man who'd saved her father. Aren't you coming with us? Carl shook his head and stroked her hair. We've done our best, but some people still can't get out. I can't just watch. Dr. Ashford gazed at Carl in admiration. Jill's eyes had never been so gentle. You'll come back, right? Carl softly cupped Jill's cheek. Wait for me. Raccoon City Police Department building. It was now deserted. Those who'd refused to leave Raccoon City also refused to die here. Some went home, others elsewhere. Carl had his own task. When he reached the rooftop, everything was ready. How many minutes left? 8. Red Queen's little girl voice answered. In 8 minutes the hydrogen bomb reaches its preset point. Start the countdown. Do it. Carl wasted no time, boarding the helicopter. The rotor spun, whipping up fierce gusts as the craft climbed. Then Red Queen's voice came again. So you really are from the future, father? Without looking, Carl replied. Don't believe me. Honestly, it's hard, but the data in these drones is stamped 2029, and the hardware's beyond our era. I know the T-virus works wonders, but time travel, so you can really shift the nuke. Carl didn't answer, instead he asked. Who ordered this missile? Not one person, all of Umbrella's top brass. Raccoon City is part of Project Alice for humanity's sake, Kane included. But you, father, have scrambled it all. If what you say is true, the future may already be changing. Still, I must warn you, the hive must not be destroyed. Why? Aren't you from the future? Don't you know? You overestimate me, I'm no omniscient god. Then I'll say only this, the hive is vital, it's hope for the future. Aim the nuke there and you'll regret it. Thanks for the tip. So, changed your mind. By now Carl had steered the chopper through the clouds, the night sky blazed with stars. Are we on target? We are. Good. Thank you, but there's something you may not know. Red Queen, no, Ms. Alicia, I never planned to hit the hive. But Carl offered no more. He crushed the controller on his right arm and tossed it away, slipped on sunglasses, released the controls, and raised his hands. A pale blue orb wrapped in gold-red phoenix energy formed as he stared skyward. A fire-tailed missile streaked down like a meteor. All right, time to feed. Boom. The blast's brilliant light lit the entire sky. He had no idea how long it had been. A voice like a devil's whisper dragged Carl from his slumber. When he opened his eyes he was met by a vast, dark, empty world, like a lightless universe, nothing visible anywhere, only the crushing, grinding, vibrating sounds of the deep sea floor, a flavor of deathly silence. But he wasn't especially alarmed. He had come here of his own accord. Carl had stayed in Raccoon City and faced the nuclear warhead head-on, not purely to save the city, but because the moment he used the Phoenix energy a second time to resurrect Dr. Ashford, the Phoenix fragment inside his body had mutated. A powerful hunger transmitted itself straight into Carl's brain. As a transmigrator, Carl immediately guessed what could have caused this hunger. He had absorbed too much of the fragment's energy and damaged the fragment's source, leaving it unable to regenerate. All else equal, that should have been a good thing. Carl's goal was to absorb the fragment's power and grow stronger. But Carl's reason told him not to. Especially after the fragment granted him a new ability, projection, letting him bestow Phoenix power on others. Anyone could choose between killing the goose that lays the golden eggs and sustainable development. Meanwhile, news had arrived that a hydrogen bomb would descend on Raccoon City. So was it a twist of fate, or an inevitability of the plot? He had clearly saved so many people and checked the virus's spread. Yet the nuke still arrived right on schedule. In that instant he understood. He had to stop this warhead from obliterating Raccoon City. Maybe this was his chance to change the story's direction. Throughout the entire Resident Evil series, movies and games alike, the destruction of Raccoon City by nuclear fire was the single most pivotal node. Only by altering that node could the world's trajectory be changed the most. If the spatial magic inside him really was tied to plot changes, only then could he gain the greatest benefit. And besides, the hunger coming from the Phoenix fragment, was there any energy on Earth greater than a nuclear weapon? After weighing everything, Carl decided to take the gamble, however dangerous. He took multiple precautions. First, he entered the hypersensory state, relying on its lightning-fast reactions to handle any uncontrollable variables. Second, he warped the space around him with spatial magic, creating a 10-kilometer-wide field to keep the hydrogen blast from touching him. Then, rather than foolishly tank the nuke, he hurled a sphere of spatial magic, containing the Phoenix fragment's energy, straight at the falling warhead. Finally, he summoned every ounce of spatial magic he could muster. Carl's spatial magic had no physical form. So when the descending nuke met the energy sphere, visible to the naked eye, as the entire warhead entered the sphere, the weapon shrank under the field's influence while layers of spatial magic wrapped around it, distorting space again and again, making the sphere, and the nuke, ever smaller. Then, boom. The instant nuke and Phoenix energy touched. A titanic explosion erupted. Blinding light flooded the sky blue orb. It looked like forever, yet the whole thing took less than 3 seconds. So even at full stretch Carl had only managed to create a 100-kilometer-wide spatial field. But it was enough. Floating in midair, the orb became a tiny sun that lit the world. Only then did Carl realize how terrifying the Phoenix energy truly was. Before the hydrogen blast's vast energy, the fragment's power was as insignificant as an ant, yet that speck devoured the nuclear energy like a black hole. The process lasted under 10 seconds. The hydrogen bomb's energy was completely swallowed by that sliver of Phoenix. In that instant the fragment felt stronger than ever, giving Carl the same pressure he had sensed from the Phoenix in the Logan world. And then something happened that Carl never expected. The fragment, like a bullied child suddenly grown up, sought revenge. Yet instead of foolishly devouring Carl's spatial magic, it seized its chance and shot straight toward Carl's body. All else equal, that should have been impossible. In the Logan timeline even Dark Phoenix gene had failed, so how could a tiny fragment succeed? But to Carl's surprise, this time the fragment really did succeed. The instant the Phoenix fragment entered his body, Carl felt a strength he had never known. And then something even more complicated happened. Just like in the Logan world, the spatial magic inside him suddenly skyrocketed. Now two mighty forces coexisted inside him, pushing his power to an unimaginable level. But in that instant Carl no longer cared how strong he had become. Because, whether from the Phoenix or the chain reaction of the spatial magic's growth. In that instant, the mysterious spatial magic finally lifted a corner of its veil. Carl sensed where it came from, a space similar to Scott's laser universe. Without hesitation he seized the fleeting sensation and opened a portal to that unknown world, then lost consciousness until suddenly he awoke. So, where exactly is this? Awake again, Carl stared at the pitch-black world. Though he could see nothing, he could feel how vast it was. Low sounds drifted past, like something swaying, like wind through a valley, mingling into a devil's whisper that gave Carl a powerful sense of deathly silence. The world filled Carl with unease. Without hesitation Carl summoned the spatial magic inside him, hoping to use its light as a beacon to illuminate the darkness. Then Carl froze, because what appeared was not the familiar pale blue spatial magic. Instead, pale blue, red, and gold fused into a rainbow-like energy, and as it appeared a vine-like object, withered yet shining pale blue, lit the world around him. What is this? Carl was genuinely astonished at this moment. As the surrounding world lit up, Carl recognized where he was almost instantly. Because this scene was far too familiar. Floating in the darkness, those withered, vine-like strands, weren't they the timelines representing every universe in Loki Season 2? Was the place he now stood the end of time where Loki of the TVA had become the god of stories? But that didn't seem right. Putting aside that Loki had already become the god of stories, mastering every timeline at the end of time and turning into a multiverse deity, this world before him was simply too dark, so dark not a trace of life could be felt, and he could see no sign of the TVA anywhere. Moreover, his gaze fell on the one timeline that was actually glowing. He could clearly sense that the faint blue radiance was the spatial magic he knew best. Yet what was different was that he could only perceive this spatial magic, he couldn't manipulate, absorb, or use it. Still, he could feel a unique connection between this spatial magic and the new energy inside his body. What kind of connection was it? He activated his hypersensory state, wanting to use its observational power to see what was going on. Unlike previous activations, when only his eyes turned blue, this time Carl's entire body was wrapped in tricolored energy, radiating brilliant rainbow light, much like Ms. Marvel's binary form. As the world around him brightened further, he clearly saw that on a more microscopic level his spatial magic and phoenix energy had formed two spheres, the familiar, big sphere enclosing small sphere, structure he had once used to bind the phoenix fragment. Then the miraculous happened. It felt exactly like Carl opening a portal. The spatial magic inside Carl's body linked with the spatial magic on this timeline, ignoring distance, continuously transferring phoenix energy into the withered timeline, reviving and nourishing it. In that instant Carl seemed to understand something. Could this be the true purpose of his spatial magic? To resurrect and nourish these withered, or even dead, timelines. Inspired, he didn't hesitate, he reached out and grasped the pale blue timeline before him. Instantly, every scene he had experienced in the Resident Evil world flashed before his eyes, freezing only when the nuclear bomb detonated as he fled Raccoon City, as though someone had pressed pause. This bizarre sight made Carl realize something. It revived, but not completely. Is it because my spatial magic isn't strong enough, or because the Phoenix power is currently too weak to fully resurrect a timeline? Carl was no saint. Even though the purpose he had just discovered for his spatial magic implied he would need to resurrect many timelines to grow stronger, that didn't mean he wished to become like Loki, someone who would sacrifice himself for the sake of other timelines. Unless there was a special reason. Like right now, inside this timeline in his hand, Jill stood bewildered, staring at the sky. Thinking of this, he temporarily drew the spatial magic back into his body. The unknown place instantly plunged into darkness again, even the Resident Evil timeline that had just lit up returned to blackness. So he had to release the spatial magic once more. But this made him think of a question. At the very least, calling this new power merely spatial now felt petty. It was a force capable of resurrecting and nourishing timelines. And this world before him also reminded Carl of Loki. At this stage, having become the god of stories, Loki was essentially the supreme deity of the TVA-controlled MCU multiverse, while this unknown place Carl stood in held so many withered, or dead, timelines. If he could resurrect them and thereby gain control over them, just as he had with the Resident Evil universe, couldn't he also become some kind of god? For instance, Carl's thoughts raced, and suddenly inspiration struck, the god of dimensions. A deity who commands dimensions beyond the MCU multiverse. If that were the case, then calling his current new power, spatial magic, would no longer fit. The magic wielded by a god of dimensions would naturally be dimensional magic. A sudden surge of greed welled up in Carl. Perhaps, if he strived toward becoming another source of magic like the Vishanti, the wellspring of Marvel magic, he too could one day become the supreme deity who governed the multiverse of dimensions. But for now, Carl looked around. He still couldn't find a way back to the MCU universe. Fortunately, Carl wasn't in any particular hurry. Compared with the future of the mutants, his own power was what mattered most. Women came second. With that, he turned his gaze to the densely packed timelines before him. Although these timelines didn't belong to the MCU universe, that didn't mean their existences were meaningless. Not only could they increase his dimensional magic, but the technology, equipment, and knowledge within them would also benefit him endlessly. So, since he couldn't return for the moment, he might as well pick another timeline and keep adventuring. Without bothering to choose carefully, he simply grabbed another withered timeline in front of him. The instant he touched it, a powerful suction pulled at him. Golden desert stretched beneath a blazing sun hanging high in the sky. As a hawk soared overhead with a piercing cry, screams rose from below where yellow sand swirled across the dunes. 5 rifle-toting soldiers were brutally beating a group of unarmed civilians in gray robes who raised their hands in surrender. Donkeys and camels pulled carts piled with supplies all around. Besides the 2-wheeled carts, these slave-like civilians also carried heavy sacks on their backs. It was 1915, outside Cairo, Egypt. The soldiers belonged to Britain, which now occupied all of Egypt and had turned this golden land into a colony. The civilians were the subjugated Egyptian people. Outside, the First World War raged on. As Britain's main base in the Middle East, the Allied power began stripping the country of every resource and enslaving its people to win the war. They would cross the desert to deliver goods from Cairo to the Suez Canal, then ship them through the Red Sea to Britain. As colonizers, the British naturally cared nothing for Egyptian lives. Thus countless Egyptians perished in the desert along the way. And the British colonizers, especially the rifle-wielding soldiers, had become this land's celestial dragons, free to abuse the Egyptian people at will. Just now, with a shriek, a disheveled girl fled the tent in tears. Behind her a portly noncommissioned officer, after yanking up his trousers, roared in rage and snatched a rifle from a nearby soldier. Bang! A single shot rang out and the girl collapsed into the sand, lifeless. Crimson blood stained the golden grains beneath her body. Watching the girl who had just died before them, eyes wide open in death, the surrounding Egyptians looked numb. It was as if none of this had anything to do with them. Because they were already used to it. Their country had been occupied by these British for 32 years, what could unarmed people like them possibly do? Just then, another young girl rushed out of the tent. Seeing her dead companion, she went mad. She screamed like a maniac, shouting in Arabic that no one could understand, and tried to rush over, only to be seized by the fat officer. He viciously whispered in perfect British English into her ear. "Look carefully, fool, this is what happens when you refuse me." In an instant, the girl's gaze toward the British officer was filled with hatred, yet he wasn't angry at all. Instead, he pinched her chin and said, "Not bad, I love that look in your eyes. Only when a wild mare puts up a fight is it worth breaking, don't you think?" But right then, the girl viciously stomped on the British officer's toes. Amid his howl of pain, she, with unbelievable agility, pulled the short sword from his waist, slipped behind him, and pressed the blade to his throat. The sudden turn of events startled every British soldier. Recovering, they swiftly raised their rifles and aimed at the girl. The girl immediately spoke in halting English. "Drop the guns, or I kill him." Still recovering from the pain, the officer tried to fight back, until the sting at his throat cooled him down. "Don't move. All right. I won't move." The officer's face, flushed from pain, flashed irritation, but he quickly calmed. Glancing sideways, he said, "Never thought a little wild mare like you had such skill, but don't forget, we're less than 10 kilometers from Cairo. Even if you kill me, you'll never escape." Hearing that, a trace of unease crept across the young girl's cheeks. Seeing it, the officer thought he'd found his chance and tried to struggle, only for the girl to jam the blade harder against his neck and coldly say, "Don't move." Bright red blood trickled out. That finally made the officer sense something wrong, the technique and composure she'd shown in combat. "You're no ordinary girl, who are you? Could you be with the Egyptian resistance?" "No. I'm not." The girl hastily denied it. She knew that once branded a rebel, every compatriot here would die. The British had provoked the fury of countless Egyptians, those who banded together became the resistance. The British showed no mercy, anyone linked to them was hanged, a warning to all would-be rebels. Of course the British officer didn't believe her. If she weren't resistance, how could a girl who looked barely 15 or 16 hold him hostage like this? It struck him, this was an opportunity. If he captured her, he might earn himself another promotion. So he resorted to trickery, saying, "Then you should let me go, because even if you aren't one of them, no one will believe you. All these people will die because of you, they'll be hanged on the gallows." The girl hesitated. Seeing that, the officer pressed harder. "I swear, release me and I'll let bygones be bygones. After all, I still need you to move these supplies. If we're late, I'll be the one blamed." Of course the girl wasn't stupid. You're lying to me. Of course not. From now on, as long as you behave, I'll forgive everything you've done. Uncertainty flickered in her eyes. She knew surrender now would be foolish, but what else could she do? Her gaze drifted toward the distance, toward Cairo, but no one there could protect her. No one in this country could protect her. Men couldn't protect women, women couldn't protect children. Her lips trembled, her body shaking, and in despair she finally released the blade from the officer's neck. Then she dropped to her knees, began reciting in ancient Egyptian, praying to a god who had never answered her. Her action caused every Egyptian around to perform the same prayer ritual. It was the only thing left for them, little better than slaves, to beg for. The officer, spared, touched his neck, seeing the blood, his face flushed crimson with rage. After so long in this land he understood a little of the language and knew exactly to whom the girl prayed. Watching these, stupid, Egyptians, he grabbed the praying girl by her hair, hauled her up, and snarled into her ear. Your Ra can't save you, just as he couldn't save this land. Everything here now belongs to Britain. If you must pray, pray to God, but God's too far away to help you. Serve me obediently and maybe I'll make it easy on you. The girl's eyes dimmed, yet still she stared at him with unyielding defiance. HMPH. Seeing that, the officer felt a surge of savage impulse. Meeting her unbending gaze, he grabbed her robe. A ripping sound tore through the air as her robe split, revealing half-bared breasts and slender legs. Terror flashed across her eyes. That finally gave the officer a taste of satisfaction. Finally scared. After I ruin you here, I'll send you to the gallows. Ha ha ha. Laughing wildly, he continued his assault. The onlookers' eyes finally changed, anger stirred within their numb stares. But facing the leveled rifles, even though only 5 British soldiers stood against more than 50 Egyptians, they still dared not resist, only shut their eyes in anguish and prayed to their gods. No. No. The girl wailed, her eyes full of terror. Her clothes had been torn away, revealing alluring wheat-colored skin. The officer stared, utterly captivated. Truly a fine little wild mare. At that moment the girl sank into total despair. She looked toward the sky, toward the scorching sun, and for the first time doubted the existence of the divine giver of light, sun god Ra. Have you truly abandoned the people of this land who worship you? Just then, her pupils suddenly dilated as if she had glimpsed something. A dazzling rainbow of light descended from the heavens. Apart from the girl, practically no one saw that blinding light fall from the sky. Until the miracle-like radiance landed on the ground not far from them, the powerful impact burst forth and flung everyone nearby away in bewilderment and terror. Boom! The shockwave from the descending light was a full kilometer across. It made the earth roll like waves. Yellow sand filled the sky as if a sandstorm had swept through. Only after about 3 minutes did everything calm down. On the silent desert, heads dusted with sand slowly lifted, eyes wide with horror. No one asked what had happened. Because when they raised their heads, they all saw the mysterious, beautiful, dazzling light. That sky blue, gold, and red glow hung above the desert like a rainbow fallen from the heavens. What is this? The British officer and soldiers, covered head to toe in sand, were stunned, but the Egyptians acted as if they were witnessing a miracle. Crawling from the sand, they dropped to their knees and began to pray. The British, understanding a little Arabic, clearly heard phrases like, God Ra has descended. That panicked the British troops. Could the Egyptian gods really be showing themselves? After all, they'd been in Egypt for years and heard the frightening legends of curses. They had no wish to become mummies. Just then the rainbow-like cascade gathered like starlight, slowly fading to reveal a human figure. Yet the sight left both Egyptians and British dumbfounded, for the figure looked nothing like a god, nor an Egyptian. He appeared British, clad in clothes and weapons they'd never seen, a sword on his back. While everyone stared at the mysterious arrival from the sky, Carl was studying them. Unlike his previous trips through time with the time controller, entering this unknown timeline from nowhere was far from comfortable. The whole way Carl felt his body torn into countless pieces, then reassembled upon arrival. Though not physically shredded, so no pain, the unprecedented experience left him dizzy and disoriented. Once those sensations faded and his body stabilized, sand and dust greeted him. He couldn't help spitting. Tui. When his mouth felt clean again, he looked around to size things up. Before him stood a crowd of Arabs and British. He recognized them as British by their uniforms and weapons, standard issue from World War I. World War I, huh? That was new. Apart from his first jump into the X-Men world, his other trips had been to the future, going back was a first. So, which world is this? His gaze swept the crowd and quickly spotted something. A slender girl with wheat-colored skin, clutching her chest in surprise as she stared at him. Though younger than the sultry face in his memory, Carl recognized her at once and walked over. If this was the world he thought, then he'd chosen his destination well. Because this world held another mighty force, magic. Unlike Carl's ease and anticipation, the British and Egyptians tensed, the British terrified, the Egyptians hopeful. Under countless eyes Carl passed through the crowd up to the British. Stop right there. The British officer, gripped by instinctive fear, still leveled his gun at Carl. He didn't want Carl any closer, it unsettled him. Carl didn't slow, continuing straight toward the man. I said stop. Terror seized the officer and his men. They trembled, staring at the now near Carl, yet none could summon the courage to pull the trigger. Carl's aim wasn't the British, he stepped past the frightened soldiers to the girl shielding her chest. Her lovely eyes widened as she gazed at the man before her, hope shining in them. Then she heard a question. What's your name? Startled, she answered at once, quickly, almost reflexively. R. Rice. Rice. The unfamiliar name made Carl frown. Had he been wrong? Was this girl not the woman from his memories, this not the world he believed? Seeing his frown, Rice suddenly recalled something, dropped to her knees, and looked up at him in reverent panic. Giver of light, messenger of the sun god Ra, I have another name, one that echoes in my dreams. Oh. Interest sparked in Carl's eyes. What is that name? The girl spoke piously. Anck Su Naman. My other name is Anck Su Naman. Now Carl was satisfied. Sure enough, he'd arrived in the world of the movie The Mummy. The girl before him was the origin of the first two Mummy films, Pharaoh's beloved concubine, caught with High Priest Imhotep, killed, and the lover Imhotep sought to revive, the reincarnation of Anck Su Naman. Seeing Carl's pleased smile, the girl called Rice, as if confirmed in her hopes, asked expectantly and devoutly. Messenger of the gods, giver of light, has the sun god Ra sent you to save Egypt? Carl raised a brow, studying the girl's youthful, graceful form. He slipped off his coat, knelt, and draped it over her shoulders before speaking gently. No, I'm afraid I have nothing to do with your god Ra. But if you need, I can still answer your prayer. As he spoke he extended his right hand to her. For a moment Anck Su Naman's face showed utter loss, then resolve. The sun god had never answered her, yet this unknown deity appeared when she needed help most. Reaching out, she clasped Carl's right hand in both of hers. I beg you, whoever you are, I, and all here, need your aid. In return, I offer you everything I am. Good. I answer your prayer. Let's begin with names. I am Carl Lance. Now, tell me your first wish. Why did Carl choose to help Anck Su Naman? There was only one reason, he also needed her help. The moment he realized he had arrived in the world of the mummy, he knew that its greatest treasure was the mysterious magic of ancient Egypt. To master that magic, he first had to master the ancient language itself. Nothing else mattered. The two miraculous books in the film, the Book of the Sun and the Book of the Dead, were both written in ancient Egyptian. Looking at it that way, Carl felt more and more like a certain Marvel character. Dr. Doom, the perfect villain in technology, magic, and superhuman ability. Carl had no interest in being a villain, but he did aspire to reach that level. When Anck Su Naman heard Carl's words, her pupils shrank. She had so many wishes, yet she feared seeming too greedy before her new god. Her gaze fell on the girl half buried in yellow sand, hatred flashing as she pointed at the 5 British soldiers. I want their lives to pay for hers. Deal. Carl rose slowly and turned his gaze to the 5 British policemen. The instant their eyes met, overwhelming terror seized them, their bodies trembled. No. 4 privates stumbled back, only the officer, pale but snarling, leveled his rifle. Die, whoever you are. Bang. A black powder bullet burst forth. Oh. Carl watched the slug drift toward him in what felt like slow motion. He realized he had grown even stronger. Back in Resident Evil he could enter hypersensory state, but only briefly. Now, even in normal time, he could trace every trajectory. Casually, he lifted 2 fingers. Ding! To everyone's disbelief, he plucked the bullet from the air. Interesting. While Carl marveled, the British officer's mind cracked. Impossible. No one catches bullets with bare fingers. Impossible. The officer emptied his revolver in frantic despair. Bang! 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 The Great War relic held only 5 rounds. One had already killed the girl, Carl had caught the second. He made no move to intercept the last 3. A prismatic shield blossomed before him. Ding ding ding. The slugs ricocheted harmlessly, flattened lead ringing like coins on marble. Carl smiled wider. His hunch had been right. The new force inside him, spatial magic fused with Phoenix Force, had finally condensed into tangible form, dimensional magic. Now it possessed physical presence like the Phoenix itself. With it he could sculpt constructs for any purpose. The officer stared at the rainbow wall, then spun and sprinted toward Cairo. The 4 privates followed. Carl never moved, he simply closed his fist. A rainbow chain uncoiled and lashed out. The 5 fleeing soldiers were skewered together like candied hawthorns. A hunger for annihilation stirred inside him. Annihilation, one of the Phoenix's gifts. Let's see what you can do. He released the hunger. Power surged down the chain, the men screamed. Ah! Flames erupted around their bodies. In a single breath their skin crisped to ash, exposing bone beneath, then crumbled into dust on the desert wind. Every Egyptian witness recoiled in horror. He no longer looked like a god, more like a demon. Yet the girl's prayer rose above the silence. Anck Su Naman knelt first, the rest of the Egyptians followed, prostrating themselves. What are you doing? Praying. From this moment on, you are the messenger of Ra, come to deliver the people of this golden land. Good. Carl stroked her cheek. Now I am your god. Gather everything, we shall save this land together. Anck Su Naman bowed, then rose and shouted in Arabic the others could not understand. The Egyptians, numb faces lit with joy, they stared at Carl as though he were their savior, then vanished into the golden desert. No one noticed the 5 missing Britons. Some assumed they had deserted back to England, others believed they had perished in the sands, or been killed by rebels, especially since the Egyptian loot and the caravan had also vanished. With Britain's attention fixed on the trenches of World War I, 5 privates were hardly worth a diplomatic incident. As weeks passed and the 5 men dissolved like dust, a peculiar rebel band emerged upon the ochre expanse. Its leader was a woman, rare in Egypt's patriarchal society. She claimed to be the reincarnation of Pharaoh Hatshepsut of the 18th dynasty. Many scoffed, yet within her ranks countless followers swore they had witnessed her miracles. Thus, buoyed by faith and marvel, her rebellion swelled into the strongest faction in Egypt's uprising. When the Great War ended and Egypt's independence movement erupted, her army blazed brightest upon the stage. Meanwhile, in the realm of archaeology, an American named Carl Lance began to carve his own legend. Time flashed forward to the year 1920. That year, under the proposal of the Egyptian army led by Anck Su Naman, the various Egyptian uprising armies united to form the Egyptian Free Officers Organization, standing firmly against the Egyptian Farouk dynasty and the British, fighting for Egypt's independence. The British naturally could not tolerate this. A fierce battle erupted between the 2 sides. At this time, World War I had ended, and the British believed they could easily crush this Free Officers Organization with their victory as a conquering nation. But unexpectedly, after one independence battle after another, the British not only failed to gain any advantage but suffered heavy losses. The weapons, equipment, and military literacy of the soldiers and officers in the Free Officers Organization exceeded British expectations. As the Free Officers Organization continued to win victories, Anck Su Naman and the Free Officers Organization's prestige among the Egyptian populace grew higher and higher. Directly challenging the Farouk dynasty, which had plunged Egypt into poverty due to its incompetence. France's Le Monde even called Anck Su Naman the Joan of Arc of the Egyptian people. This caused the British to lose face completely. Since they could not defeat the Free Officers Organization militarily, the British began to think of ways to sabotage and split the Free Officers Organization from within. This was something the British were best at. And indeed, the Free Officers Organization was in chaos internally. To maintain an army required no small amount of money. Therefore, the various Egyptian uprising armies were mostly controlled by the Egyptian nobility, landlords, and wealthy merchant classes. But Anck Sunaman was just an ordinary civilian woman. The British believed that these arrogant men would never submit to such a woman. But unexpectedly, when they sent out spies, the results were unbelievable. This army composed of nobles, landlords, and wealthy merchants had actually united tightly around Anck Sunaman, obeying her every word. The reason was simple. These people believed Anck Sunaman was truly the reincarnation of the pharaoh, possessing divine power to heal their illnesses, extend their lifespans, and guide their souls to the afterlife after death, a perfect world where the souls of the dead could continue to live, much like the Christian heaven. The British naturally did not believe this reason. If Egypt truly had these gods, then the British would never have been able to colonize Egypt for so long, enslave its people, and even use the mummies of their pharaohs as aphrodisiacs. So, the British had their spies continue the investigation. As a result, they uncovered a name: Karl Lantz. Karl Lantz, an American. In 1916, he appeared in Egypt as an explorer. Unlike most who claimed to be explorers but were actually tomb raiders. Karl Lantz called himself an internationalist, declaring that all artifacts excavated from Egyptian soil belonged to the Egyptian people and the entire world, and that no other nation had the right to seize them for themselves, including Britain. He not only said this but also acted upon it. He personally funded the recruitment of Egyptians, forming an expedition team. Over 4 years, they excavated and protected many relics of ancient Egyptian dynasties, and cracked down on many tomb raiders. To house these excavated treasures, he raised funds internationally and, in 1918, built Egypt's second museum after the Cairo Museum in Aswan, the capital of Aswan province in southern Egypt, the Nubian Museum, placing all his excavated treasures there for the entire world to visit. This museum was named after Egypt's renowned Nubian civilization. On the day the museum was completed, the news made headlines in major international newspapers, turning Karl Lantz into a world-famous internationalist, philanthropist, and archaeologist. Aswan, once a poor city relying solely on agriculture, suddenly became a tourist center for Egypt, attracting countless visitors from Europe and America. This brought immense wealth and countless job opportunities to the Egyptian people, propelling Aswan to become Egypt's second-largest city. Karl Lantz thus became a forever friend in the hearts of the Egyptian people. But the British uncovered more than just this. Because, apart from the above identities, Karl Lantz had another identity unknown to many. That is, the husband of the Egyptian Joan of Arc, the reincarnated pharaoh, and one of the leaders of the Free Officers Organization, Anck Sunaman. Upon seeing this news, the British's first reaction was not anger but a headache. Because they had finally found who was backing the Free Officers Organization. The Americans. Now it all made sense. Where did the Free Officers Organization get their weapons and equipment? Who else but those Americans? And almost everyone knew that Karl Lantz dared to act so boldly in Egypt not only because of his own capabilities but more importantly, because of his identity as an American. Go investigate, and call the American consul here. I want to see what these Americans are up to. The British thought well. But they forgot that after this World War, although they were still the empire on which the sun never sets, the United States had made a fortune from the war and its ambitions had grown, wanting to participate in international affairs and take a share from these colonies. So, regarding British diplomatic pressure, the Americans paid no attention. Instead, in the newspapers, they praised Karl Lantz, this American, for his internationalist actions in Egypt, and openly expressed support for Anck Sunaman, this warrior fighting for Egyptian independence. Now everyone knew that the backers of the Free Officers Organization were the Americans. This allowed the Free Officers Organization to develop even more rapidly. As for why this transmigrator, Karl, became an American in this world and received American support. Apart from the Americans' original desire to participate in international affairs, Karl provided large orders to American arms dealers, and also because Karl displayed miracles to some important figures. The British saw that the situation was hopeless and that continuing to fight would only further disgrace the British Empire. So, they began negotiations with the Free Officers Organization. Thus, in 1922, the negotiations finally concluded. In February of the same year, the British government announced Egypt's conditional independence. Although it was conditional, Britain still held control over many issues, including the Suez Canal, diplomacy, and defense, but after 40 years of colonization, the Egyptian people finally overthrew the Farouk dynasty and welcomed independence. As for Karl, the mastermind behind all this success, he was not particularly interested. At this moment, he quietly stayed in the Nubian Museum, studying the intelligence he had just obtained. Miss Evelyn has already obtained the key to open Imhotep's coffin. In an office bathed in dim yellow light, mysterious ancient Egyptian artifacts were scattered everywhere: statues, jars, weapons, stelae, gold, jade, even a small stone sarcophagus for a mummy, all etched with symbols, statues, and inscriptions representing Egyptian deities, cramming the entire room. The surrounding bookshelves were packed with volumes on ancient Egypt, as well as mysterious clay tablets and papyri. By the window sat a huge desk. 7 years had passed, yet Karl looked exactly the same. He studied the report in his hands with a grave expression. Just then, footsteps sounded outside. Without a knock, the door swung open and a cheerful voice rang out. "Daddy." A petite, adorable figure pushed the door wide and slipped through the gap. Her black pearl eyes darted toward the desk. Spotting Karl, she ran over joyfully. "Oh." Karl's face melted into a doting smile. He opened his arms and scooped the little girl up as she charged at him. "My little darling, Daddy missed you so much." She looked about 5 or 6, fair-skinned, delicate-featured, with shoulder-length black hair and a trendy white dress, like a little princess. Apart from her mother's subtle resemblance in those fine features, she bore no trace of today's Egyptians. This little imp was Karl's daughter in this world, his firstborn, Soot Lance. Apart from the main X-Men world, this was his third journey, and the mummy was by far the longest, 7 years, from 1915 to the present 1922. Karl had never planned on having children, but in his first year here Anck Su Naman had offered herself to him, asking to bear his offspring. Of course, Karl sensed why she felt that way. She lacked security. She never knew when this visitor from the heavens might leave. She hoped a child would bind the god's envoy to her side. After living with him, she realized Karl was little different from ordinary men in certain ways. He desired her body, so her wish grew even stronger. Karl found no reason to refuse and agreed. Thus this little one, Soot, came into being. Karl hugged his daughter Soot, showering her with affection. "Did you have fun with mommy?" "Not really." The little girl pouted, her bright eyes full of sunny confidence, speaking boldly. "Everyone's scared of me, no one wants to play. Adventuring with Daddy is way more fun." Just then, a gentle voice sounded from the doorway. "Soot, if you say that, mommy will feel hurt." The girl who had become a woman, wife, and mother, radiating the aura of a power player, walked in slowly, wearing an Egyptian-style gown and exquisite gold ornaments. The little girl clung tightly to her father's neck, complaining. "Mommy never plays with me or tells me bedtime stories anymore." An apologetic look crossed Anck Su Naman's face. "Sorry, Soot, mommy's been terribly busy lately." The little girl showed her mother no mercy. Anck Su Naman could only smile wryly. She felt no jealousy. Watching her husband dote on their daughter, she knew she'd chosen right. Why? Even now, she set aside 5 days each month for them, no matter how hectic things got. "Come here." Karl beckoned to Anck Su Naman. Eyes tender, she walked over, knelt beside him, let him caress her cheek, and gave him a deep kiss, while Soot in his other arm watched with sparkling eyes. When the kiss ended, Karl asked with concern. "How's your parliament coming along?" "Not well. The British keep stirring trouble. Our independence set a bad example and they don't want us thriving. They've incited many to form a new party to snatch seats, and worse, plenty think a woman has no right to the presidency. Don't be afraid, the British days are numbered. Do what your heart tells you. Egypt has had queens before, remember, you're the reincarnation of a pharaoh." With her husband's backing, Anck Su Naman regained her confidence. At that moment she noticed the letter on the desk. Darling, have you found the city of the dead, Hamunaptra? Yes. Carl hid nothing, still holding his daughter. He picked up the note with the intel. The key has fallen into Evelyn's hands. Anck Su Naman's eyes lit up. So the legendary high priest Imhotep really is buried there, and he'll soon be resurrected. Exactly. Carl's gaze turned playful. So, want to meet your 1,000-year-old lover? He endured the agony of the scarabs for a millennium, sealed in Hamunaptra, just to resurrect your past life. No. Anck Su Naman answered without hesitation. That was my past life, not me. I have no intention of becoming fodder for someone else's soul. At that instant, ambition blazed in her eyes. With Carl's help, she had become the most powerful woman in Egypt, rivaled only by the legendary pharaoh Hatshepsut. Why sacrifice all that for a corpse dead 3,000 years? Seeing this, Carl laughed. He liked ambitious women. It meant they were smart, not saints. Just like Anck Su Naman before him, the girl of 7 years ago had become a ruthless, seasoned politician. And you, darling, what will you do? Same as always, assemble an archaeological team. Not to mention the 2 scriptures I want, the gold in that city is beyond counting. At this, the well-behaved Sut could hold back no longer. Daddy, can I come too? No. Carl refused without hesitation. Daddy's going on serious business this time, and it's dangerous. Ordinary adventures were fine, he'd taken Sut on a few, but this was different. This time he might truly face Egypt's gods. Anck Su Naman nodded and lifted Sut from Carl's arms. All right, little darling, stay with mommy these days. Daddy will be back soon, won't you? At that moment, unease flickered in her eyes. She had long known her heaven-sent husband's sole purpose in this world was the city of the dead, Hamunaptra. Carl reached out and stroked Anck Su Naman and their daughter Sut. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. And so, 2 days later, an archaeological team was quietly formed and set off for Cairo. Why go to Cairo? Only one reason: the story's protagonists start out in Cairo. With Carl and Anck Su Naman's current power, Carl could easily snatch the key that unlocks the Book of Amun-Ra and the Book of the Dead from O'Connell and head to Hamunaptra alone, leaving the others behind. It wouldn't be hard. But after careful thought, Carl abandoned the idea. During 7 years of studying ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and mythology, he stumbled upon unexpected results. First, ancient Egyptian myth is obsessed with destiny. Or, put more plainly, cause and effect. In the Mummy Saga, destiny binds Imhotep and O'Connell. O'Connell is fated to be the pharaoh's guard who defeats Imhotep. Without O'Connell, could anyone even enter the city of the dead, open Imhotep's sarcophagus, and resurrect him? Carl doesn't believe in fate, but he won't challenge it either. Especially when nothing is at stake. He wants no unnecessary trouble. Second, learning Egyptian magic might not be as easy as he hoped. After years of research, he discovered Egyptian magic is nothing like he imagined. Unlike Eastern fantasy, where one refines heaven and earth's spiritual energy and claims ownership, Egyptian magic is borrowed from the gods. The high priests do not own the power, they only wield it. The gods can revoke it at will. For example, High Priest Imhotep and the Scorpion King lost their divine gifts when Anubis reclaimed them, rendering them mortal. Carl refuses to rely on borrowed power that may vanish in another universe, let alone power that demands worship. Fortunately, his 7 years of mythological research uncovered a loophole: the primordial waters. As in most creation myths, before the world began, there was only chaos, an endless, watery abyss. This water, the primordial waters, also called the waters of original chaos. From these waters rose the supreme deity of Egyptian myth, the first law of the universe, the embodiment of cosmic power, Ra, the sun god. All other gods were born from Ra, the sole law of the world. If Carl could obtain the primordial waters, could he become a god of his own, wielding the universe's fundamental law? Even if not as mighty as Ra, it would be his own power, not borrowed. It sounded far-fetched. If the creation myth were true, eons had passed since the primordial waters vanished into legend. Yet Carl found a clue. Somewhere in the world, a trace of the primordial waters remains. In the legendary Shangri-La, there is a spring said to grant eternal youth and power, the fountain of youth. Yes, the very spring the Dragon Emperor sought in Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, where he transformed into a three-headed dragon. Karl cared nothing for the Dragon Emperor, but the fountain intrigued him. Still, he must tread carefully. Guarding the fountain is the 2,000-year-old sorceress Ziyuan. His plan unfolded in 3 steps. Step 1. Infiltrate the protagonists, exploit O'Connell's destiny, and obtain the Book of Amun-Ra and the Book of the Dead to study Egyptian spells. He wanted to test whether substituting another energy source, his own dimensional magic, could activate the spells. If not, he would reverse engineer them to forge his own dimensional magic. After all, the Book of Amun-Ra and the Book of the Dead describe the fundamental laws of life and death. Step 2. Resurrect Imhotep and learn how to borrow divine power. Whether Imhotep cooperates or not, Karl will use the Phoenix's Devour ability to absorb Imhotep's mana. Step 3. Journey to Shangri-La, claim the primordial waters, and ascend to true godhood. He also remembers the bamboo slips and oracle bones Ziyuan carried when she fled the Dragon Emperor, filled with secrets of supernatural power. Such as the 5-element sorcery and the secret of Qi. Outside Cairo, at the Nile harbor. Giza port. A mid-sized yellow passenger liner docked here. The Mummy Saga's protagonists, blonde beauty Evelyn, hero O'Connell, her bumbling brother Jonathan, and the greedy warden Hassan, boarded one by one. The moment they stepped aboard, O'Connell's mercenary instincts screamed danger. Something's wrong. Jonathan, where did you buy the tickets? At the ticket window. What's the matter? Look around. Under O'Connell's warning, Evelyn, Jonathan, and the warden noticed the crew and passengers were all Egyptians, armed to the teeth. They realized they'd boarded a pirate ship. A familiar voice rang out. Miss Evelyn. The voice brought joy to Evelyn's face as she turned toward the cabin and cried out in delight. Mr. Lance. Oh, Mr. Lance, what a pleasant surprise. What brings you here? Evelyn's face lit up with unmistakable joy. She hurried over, trembling with excitement and eagerly extending her hand. Jonathan, standing nearby, visibly relaxed at the sight of the newcomer. O'Connell, however, asked in bewilderment. Who is he? The warden looked at him as though he were some country bumpkin. You don't recognize him. Am I supposed to? Why should I? Watching Evelyn pump Karl Lance's hand in delight, Jonathan explained. That's Karl Lance, director of the Nubian Museum in Aswan, Egypt's greatest explorer, philanthropist, and internationalist of the century. They say his Nubian museum is worth more than every museum in Egypt combined. How could you not know? Why would I? O'Connell shrugged. Then, seeing the two chatting so warmly, the beautiful Evelyn beside the handsome Karl, asked with a hint of jealousy, he and Evelyn. Relax, Jonathan chuckled, raising an eyebrow. Mr. Lance is married, his kid's this tall. I've met the little rascal, adorable. As for you, winning my sister over won't be easy. O'Connell exhaled in relief, about to retort. When the warden suddenly cried out in panic, we're doomed. If he's headed for Hamunaptra too, we'll come back empty-handed. Both O'Connell and Jonathan looked alarmed. Jonathan was counting on this expedition to make his fortune. Just then, Evelyn voiced the question on everyone's mind. Mr. Lance, what a delightful surprise. What brings you here? Karl answered candidly, I'm searching for the city of the dead, Hamunaptra. Ah! Evelyn gasped, heart racing. Mr. Lance, have you found where Hamunaptra lies? Karl shook his head. No, but someone can lead us there. He turned and shouted behind him, Benny. A weaselly, scrawny man stepped out, glancing nervously at O'Connell. Our guide, Mr. Benny, he's been to Hamunaptra. Every eye swung to O'Connell, but he only glared, strode up to Benny, forced a smile, and said to Karl, fancy meeting you here, Benny, old pal. Mr. Lance, mind if I borrow my friend for a catch-up? Of course, be my guest. Watching O'Connell drag Benny off like a hawk seizing a chick, everyone realized this guide truly knew where the city of the dead was hidden. I'm ruined. The warden wailed, clutching his head. You owe me compensation, you fools. His outburst made Karl ask, are you also looking for the city of the dead? Evelyn looked sheepish. Jonathan jumped in smoothly, yes, Mr. Lance. Would you mind if we joined forces? Karl glanced at Evelyn, then at Jonathan and the warden. No problem at all. I. Suddenly a shout rose from the dock below. Mr. Lance. Mr. Lance, telephone call from Aswan. Excuse me, I must take this. The moment Lance left, the warden exploded, why are we still going? Jonathan barked back, idiot. A whole city of the dead, we pinch a trifle and we're rich for life. Plus, we've got something they don't. The warden's eyes lit up again. Just then O'Connell dragged his old pal, Benny back. Benny looked thoroughly bullied. With Lance absent, O'Connell leaned in and whispered, I grilled Benny. Mr. Lance has a map. Benny saw it, and I sneaked a peek. They're pros. Still game. Absolutely. Evelyn stepped forward. Finding Hamunaptra has been my lifelong dream. Then it's settled. Just then Carl returned from the dock and headed straight into the cabin. Moments later, a child's complaint drifted out. Why, Daddy, can you always find my hiding spot? Because I'm your father. Do you know how worried Mom and I get when we can't find you? Everyone exchanged puzzled glances. Soon Carl emerged carrying a little girl. Wow. The child instantly captured every gaze, utterly adorable, like a tiny princess brimming with sunshine and mischief. Cradling his daughter, Carl introduced her. Sorry, everyone, this is my daughter Soot Lance. Her mother just phoned, the little rascal had gone missing. Lucky guess, she always hides here. Soot pouted sweetly. I want to come on your adventure, Daddy, please. Fine, Carl sighed, unable to resist. But stay right beside me or I'll send you straight home, deal? Soot cheered, yay. You're the best daddy in the world. Come on, let's call Mom to say you're safe. Sorry about that, folks. Watching the father and daughter leave, Evelyn felt a pang of envy. She longed for such a perfect husband and charming child. O'Connell, too, lowered his guard, secretly yearning for a family life like that. Once everything was settled, the cruise finally set sail. They would leave from Giza port, travel up the Nile to Middle Egypt, disembark, then cross the desert by camel to reach their final destination, Thebes. Once the holiest city of ancient Egypt, now a ruin and a paradise for tomb raiders. According to the treasure map, the city of the dead, Hamunaptra, lay hidden somewhere within its sands. At night, under a thin moon and scattered stars, the Nile flowed. A cruise ship glided forward. With Carl on the expedition, the American archaeologists were surplus to requirements. He had especially kept his eye on a certain fellow named Benny. 7 years of treasure hunting had turned Carl into a seasoned Egyptologist. Consequently, he needed no special preparation, he simply followed routine. On the small upper deck, Carl cradled Soot, telling her a bedtime story. Although the little girl's arrival had been unplanned, Carl poured every ounce of love into her. For the first time, he felt what it meant to be a father. All in all, life was good. Just then, footsteps sounded behind them. Father and daughter turned to see Evelyn walking up in a brown trench coat. Sorry, am I interrupting? No, of course not, please, sit. Carl's eyes brightened at the sight of the radiant leading lady, Evelyn. Truth be told, Carl had initially entertained thoughts about Evelyn. She was the heroine, after all, but abandoned them after a brief appraisal. The reason was simple. In the world of mummies, Evelyn excelled, erudite, clever, beautiful, yet possessed a trait Carl currently had no use for, kindness and innocence. That meant she would harbor too many opinions of her own. More importantly, she was British. Even without Carl, she would manage perfectly well. Unlike Anck Sunaman, who had started with nothing, relied utterly on him, and possessed ambition without scruples. That was exactly what Carl needed. Not to mention, they now had a child together. Soot's large eyes brimmed with curiosity as Evelyn sat down. Evelyn, not overthinking it, simply greeted her. Hello, little darling. Hello, my name's Soot. As in Hatshepsut. Yes, Mama and Papa chose it specially, they hope I'll be as clever as that queen. A lovely name indeed. Only after their chat ended did Carl ask curiously. So, Miss Evelyn, are you two finding the night long and sleep elusive? No, I'm just a bit nervous. Evelyn glanced toward the armed soldiers patrolling below. Carl understood at once. Sorry, they startled you. No need to be afraid. Better safe than sorry, Miss Evelyn. Since your destination is also Hamunaptra, you know what sort of place it is. Evelyn seemed to recall something and asked nervously. O'Connell told me the place is cursed, something beneath the sand, could it be true? Who knows? I'm referring to something else. Ever heard of the Pharaoh's Guard? The Pharaoh's Guard, you mean the soldiers who protected the Pharaoh in ancient Egypt? Precisely. In fact, this isn't my first search for Hamunaptra. Previously, I was always obstructed by a certain group. Only later did I learn they claim descent from the Pharaoh's Guard, tasked with guarding the city of the dead. Evelyn was astonished. You mean, they'll come looking for us? Better safe than sorry, right? Evelyn nodded, surprised. She had not imagined such danger on this expedition. Just then, more footsteps sounded. All three turned to see O'Connell and Jonathan standing there awkwardly. Sorry, Evelyn, I wasn't eavesdropping, it was O'Connell. Jonathan quickly excused himself. O'Connell shot him an incredulous look. Carl didn't mind. Seems no one can sleep tonight, sit wherever you like. Jonathan immediately claimed the seat beside his sister. O'Connell sat down, puzzled. Once seated, Jonathan could hardly wait to ask. Mr. Lance, may I ask a question? Of course, go ahead. Mr. Lance, I've heard you claim to have no interest in the treasures inside the tombs, that they belong to the Egyptian people. Is it true you've never kept any for yourself? Jonathan's bold question startled Evelyn and O'Connell. Fortunately, Carl showed no anger. I understand your meaning, but your wording is inaccurate. Someone else pinned that label on me. What do you mean? Simple. In my view, the treasures inside tombs fall into two categories. One possesses archaeological value. Through these artifacts, I can study and understand the civilization of ancient Egypt. The other lacks such value, purely monetary items like gold and pearls. I still need money to pay salaries, build museums, and grease necessary palms. Jonathan's eyes lit up as he revealed his true intention. Then would you mind if, during this adventure, we too pocket a few trinkets? Carl laughed, expressing goodwill. Of course, anything without archaeological value is yours for the taking, grab as much as you can. As for which items possess archaeological value and which don't, I believe Miss Evelyn can inform you. Wow, thank you so much. Jonathan leapt up joyfully. Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise, while O'Connell asked curiously. Why? Mr. Lance, don't you want to keep those treasures for yourself? No need. Anything whose value can be measured is, to me, not worth much. What I truly desire is that which is priceless. Evelyn's gaze filled with admiration. As a scholar devoted to studying ancient Egypt, she understood Carl's meaning perfectly. Of course, another reason is that hoarding is poor practice, it attracts many enemies. Now O'Connell understood. He no longer doubted Carl's generosity. It was indeed a wise choice. Soot, cradled in Carl's arms, memorized every word as she watched the others idolize her father. Just then, shouts erupted from below. The ship's searchlight swept the river. 3 small boats appeared, packed with masked men wielding various weapons, startling Evelyn and the others. Could these be the Pharaoh's Guard? No idea, but it no longer matters. Carl shouted down. Fire a warning shot and scare them off. Understood. Realizing they had been spotted, and hearing gunfire, the boats reluctantly departed. The next morning, the group finally reached port. Disembarking, they mounted camels, boarded trucks, and headed into the desert toward Thebes. Thebes, once hailed as the greatest and most illustrious capital in the world during ancient Egypt. Now, it could not withstand the erosion of time, reduced to ruins buried beneath yellow sand, becoming a paradise for tomb robbers and explorers of this era. The journey from the port to Thebes was still quite long, crossing the Golden Desert, taking at least a day and night. Thus, they were not in a hurry, traveling by day and resting by night. Carl had waited 7 days in this world, another day or two made no difference. Still, a minor mishap occurred along the way. Such a large archaeological team inevitably drew attention. Especially when resupplying at the port. Under the night sky, the desert temperature plummeted. They pitched camp, forming a protective circle with camels, cars, and trucks around everyone. From their camp, Carl could clearly see furtive followers nearby. Their tents glowed conspicuously in the dark. Who are they? The naive Evelyn asked, only noticing them after nightfall. People after the same fortune as us. The warden unloaded the camels, sneering sarcastically, leaving Evelyn more puzzled until O'Connell arrived with blankets. Call them explorers if you're polite, tomb robbers if you're not. Here, desert nights get cold. I'm no tomb robber. Evelyn protested, yet happily accepted O'Connell's care. Wrapping herself in the blanket, she walked to the center of the camp. A huge bonfire blazed, warming everyone around. Some drank, others ate, the atmosphere was harmonious. It was beyond her expectations. Just then, a sweet voice whispered beside her. Hello, Evelyn. Oh, hello, Soot. Evelyn adored the cute girl, Mr. Lance's daughter, especially her pearl-clear eyes, even wishing for such a daughter herself. What's up? Evelyn knelt and asked gently. Daddy said dinner's ready and sent me to invite you. Thanks, we'll be right there. Soot skipped back to her father's tent. After informing Jonathan and O'Connell, the three headed to Lance's tent. Initially embarrassed, they unhesitatingly sat when faced with the lavish spread of food and wine. Sit wherever you like, no need to be polite. Thank you so much. Dinner began, everyone heartily enjoyed the meal, even Evelyn drank a few mouthfuls, her face flushing. Soot obediently sipped juice, observing everything. Mr. Lance, why not drive those awful tomb robbers away? Tipsy from wine, the uninhibited Evelyn asked curiously. It's pointless, people are greedy. Drive one group away, another follows. They know if they tail us, they'll find Hamunaptra, the legendary city of the dead, filled with countless treasures. Any one of them could secure a lifetime of comfort, it's a risk worth taking. Carl's words embarrassed Jonathan, for he thought the same. O'Connell seized the topic and asked. Besides camels, we have trucks. I see you've brought a lot of stuff, is it necessary? Trust me, I'm a professional. I've studied Hamunaptra longer than any of you. What do you think is there? This seemed to remind O'Connell of something dreadful, and he couldn't help asking. For example. Wait. Soot. Go get the book from Daddy's desk. Soot happily ran over and soon brought a thick book. Carl flipped a few pages and placed it before everyone. What's this? On it was a beetle-like creature. Evelyn's eyes lit up. She wiped her hands and took the book. It's a scarab. Clever. What's this? The others were puzzled. In ancient Egypt, this was used to deter tomb robbers. It's a carnivorous bug, with corpses to feed on, it can live for thousands of years. Once it burrows into your body, it'll devour you bit by bit. Eek! Jonathan and O'Connell gasped, as if feeling the pain. Soot's face tensed slightly. Seeing this, Carl stroked his daughter's head. What's wrong, scared? Soot nervously shook her head. Carl laughed heartily, spreading his arms. Soot obediently nestled into her father's embrace. So these bugs really exist and are still in Hamunaptra? Evelyn asked curiously. According to the records, yes, but don't worry. As terrifying as they are, they're still flesh and blood bugs, and we've brought equipment to eliminate them. What? Gasoline and flamethrowers, insect repellent. No wonder. O'Connell recalled the truckload of gasoline he'd secretly seen. Besides, there are other dreadful traps, like hydrochloric acid and mercury, common anti-tomb robber measures, but don't underestimate them. Everyone tensed slightly at Carl's words. Evelyn looked at Soot in Carl's arms. For some reason, she felt a familiar twinge between the girl's brows, wondering if she was drunk. Just then, O'Connell asked a question that snapped everyone to attention. Mr. Lance, do you believe that beneath the desert lies something science can't explain, terrible monsters? All eyes turned to Carl. Without hesitation, Carl answered. Of course, I believe. In fact, my main purpose in going to Hamunaptra is related to this. What? Everyone was shocked. I've heard that beneath the desert of the city of the dead lie the two oldest scriptures of Egypt. The Book of the Sun and the Book of the Dead. Evelyn incredulously uttered the names of the two scriptures. They really exist. Yes. Carl nodded affirmatively. If you can help me find them, I promise to grant any wish within my power. Jonathan's eyes lit up instantly. O'Connell asked warily. What are they? Two books recording all of Egypt's knowledge of life and death. Rumors say the Book of the Sun comes from the sun god Ra, detailing all of Egypt's white magic of life, while the Book of the Dead comes from the god of death Anubis, detailing all of Egypt's black magic of death. Everyone's gaze toward Carl shifted. At this moment, they realized Carl's true purpose. So, you really believe in those Egyptian gods? Misunderstand me, I'm merely interested in Egyptian magic. That night's conversation was just a small interlude among the group. Evelyn's party found it hard to believe Carl was interested in such occult things, but, except for O'Connell, everyone thought it was good news. Evelyn simply didn't believe in any of that mumbo-jumbo. As a scholar, if those things really existed, she would have encountered them in the Cairo Museum. It houses the largest collection of mummies in the world. Jonathan figured it was a perfect chance. Find the two books first and make a fortune off Carl. Only O'Connell, who had truly seen the terrifying thing buried beneath the desert, felt uneasy. Still, that didn't stop the journey. Thus, after another full day and night of travel, at dawn, before the sun had risen, they finally reached their destination. Inside the car, drowsy-eyed Soot rubbed her eyes at the cheering outside and asked curiously, "Daddy, are we there?" "Yes. Come on, out we go." Carl stepped out, opened the door, and lifted his daughter high. Soot looked around in puzzlement. Nothing but barren desert. "Don't worry, good things come to those who wait." As the words fell, a red glow appeared on the far horizon of the golden sands. The golden sun slowly peeked out. "Mr. Lance." Benny rode his camel over, ingratiating. "Well done, you're free." Carl said coldly. Benny's face lit up at once. "Thank you so much." He obediently stepped aside and quietly watched the sunrise. At the edge of the earth, as the sun fully hung over the desert, a majestic city appeared before everyone's eyes. At that instant, this miracle-like scene made them all stare. Go. Everybody move. On the golden sands, within the ruined city of the dead, Hamunaptra. The archaeological team Carl had brought practically occupied the place. "Daddy, is this the city you were looking for?" "Yes, sweetheart." Cradling Soot, Carl gazed at the two largest statues. "Someone." The archaeologists hurried over. "Mr. Lance." Carl pointed to the statue of sun god Ra between two pillars and, below it, the lone statue of the god of death, Anubis. "See those? Dig straight down from their feet." "Understood." "Hey, two groups, bring gear, follow me." Everyone sprang into action, tools flying as they excavated. Nearby, Evelyn's group watched curiously. "What are they doing?" Evelyn seemed to catch on. "They're really hunting for the Book of the Sun and the Book of the Dead." "What? If the legend's true, the books lie beneath the gods' feet." Now everyone focused on the two statues. The warden and Jonathan cared nothing for books. "So what do we do now? Where's my gold?" "Don't forget, you used that gold to ransom his head. I'm your creditor now." Truthfully, Evelyn was sick of this greedy man, but her nature wouldn't let her break a promise. "Follow me, I may have found an entrance." Watching the four disappear, a mysterious smile touched Carl's face. He didn't stop them, he wanted to see whether fate truly existed. Under his influence, would the protagonist still release Imhotep? As for himself, at his order, the areas around the statues of sun god Ra and Anubis bustled with activity. Carl was no tomb raiding master, he couldn't read the land. His method was blunt, exhaling style: throw men, machines, and explosives at it. However solid the ancient tombs, they couldn't stand against manpower and TNT. Some relics got damaged, but it was still gentler than common looters. But still, Carl beckoned, and a fierce-looking man approached. "Boss. Find 5 fall guys." "Got it." As the man left, Soot in Carl's arms pinched his cheek, turning his face toward her. "Daddy, you just smiled like a big bad guy." Ha ha. Carl didn't mind showing cruelty in front of his daughter. Better she grow into a clever, bad woman, like Anck Sunaman than a naive girl like Evelyn. Then will Soot hate Daddy for being a big bad guy. Soot shook her head obediently and kissed his cheek. Daddy is Daddy, no matter what, he's still Daddy. Moved, Carl hugged her tightly and said gently, "Let's grab some food first, it'll be a while before they dig a passage." He was right. About half an hour later, with the Egyptians, cheers, they broke through beneath Anubis first. Carl had to go over. "Stay here like a good girl, it isn't safe inside yet. Once it is, Daddy will take you down." Soot nodded obediently and hid inside the tent. When Carl arrived, the men had emptied the sand beneath Anubis, revealing huge stone blocks. One glance told him he was on the roof of some temple. Unlike pyramids, many ancient Egyptian temples were built underground. By then the workers had drilled an opening big enough for 2. "We've checked. It's safe inside." Good. Gear up and let's go down. Wearing gas masks and carrying tools and lamps, the men descended one by one. It was an underground stone chamber, easily large enough for 100 people. The walls were covered with murals. One look at the hieroglyphs told Carl he'd come to the right place. He stepped forward. Noting a later added block carved with the falcon-headed sun god Ra, he knew this was where the ancient Egyptians placed sarcophagi. And these people had been guilty. Only the guilty were punished, crushed beneath Anubis's feet. The innocent lay beneath the statue of sun god Ra. Everyone, protective gear on. Start digging. While Carl led the workers to pry open the sarcophagi. Below them Evelyn's group threaded through passage after passage and arrived at the same spot. Where is this? Where's my treasure? The warden looked around at the empty space and complained. Evelyn gazed in rapture at the statues carved into the walls and stroked them reverently. Incredible, we're actually standing beneath the statue of Anubis. What? Evelyn explained. Ancient Egyptian temples rarely had only one level, 2 or 3 stories are quite common. O'Connell caught on. So you're saying we're on the second level and Mr. Lance is on the first? Or possibly the third? Second, third, I don't care. I'm going somewhere else. He had spotted a passage that plunged deeper underground. Evelyn and the others didn't bother to stop him. Jonathan wanted to follow, but Evelyn held him back. Let's dig right here, upward. We might reach the Book of the Dead before they do. Really? Jonathan's eyes lit up and he perked to life. Luck of the draw. Then what are we waiting for? Let's move. O'Connell and Jonathan grabbed pickaxes and started hacking at the ceiling. The first blow sent a tremor through the stone overhead. A sudden cold wind swept by, carrying a ghastly shriek. All 3 froze. Did you guys hear that? Yet having come this far, they weren't about to quit. After a pause they resumed digging, and time slipped by. Directly above them the workers' excavation was nearing its end. Knowing the trap, Carl had no intention of letting the men die for nothing. After hammering the sarcophagi until cracks spider-webbed across the stone, the workers inserted iron hooks, attached pulleys and chains, and linked them to trucks outside. With the engines roaring, modern machinery easily tore the sarcophagus doors open. PSSSH. A gush of highly acidic hydrochloric acid spurted out, but it harmed no one. Carl and the workers had kept their distance. When the hissing finally stopped, Carl sent men in. All clear, boss. And we found what you wanted. Inside the temple everything had been tidied away. A huge wooden crate now dominated everyone's view. Everyone else topside, then bring down the scapegoats. Yes, sir. Most workers left. In their place came 5 bound Britons and 5 rifle-toting soldiers, adventurers who had trailed the party unnoticed. What are you doing? Mr. Lance, we mean no harm. We just want a share of the loot. At that moment the 5 Britons were terrified, faces white and streaming with cold sweat. Don't be afraid. Carl smiled. I brought you here to give you a chance to get rich. He pointed at the crate. See that? Open it and you walk free. I only want 1 book inside, the rest is yours. The 5 looked at one another, uneasy. Of course they didn't believe it. And if we refuse? Carl said nothing, the soldiers simply raised their rifles. Okay, we'll do it. At his signal the workers cut their ropes. Under gun barrels the 5 Britons, drenched in sweat, inched toward the crate. Mysterious hieroglyphs covered its surface. They read, "Whosoever opens this chest shall release the vengeance of the spirits, break the curse, and bring death upon every opener." Naturally the Britons couldn't read them, they only expected a trap. Resigned to death, they slowly lifted the lid. Rumble. The lid swung open, a blast of foul wind roared out, carrying a bestial howl. The 5 collapsed in terror, legs turned to jelly. Even the soldiers flinched. Only Carl looked mildly surprised. For in that instant he clearly saw black, sand-like smoke stream from the hieroglyph-carved statues on the walls and pour into the 5 men who had opened the chest. Interesting, so these wall glyphs are the very medium of Egyptian sorcery. It reminded him of another magic, runic magic. Power flows through special characters carved in stone. In ancient Egypt those characters are hieroglyphs. The Britons, of course, knew none of this. Nervously they patted themselves, found no injury, and stared at Carl in disbelief. We're alive. Naturally. Carl stepped forward and looked into the crate. Right on top lay the object of his desire. Silk wrapping fell away, revealing a black tome heavy with occult mystery, the Book of the Dead, repository of every dark spell of ancient Egypt. Well done. Carl hugged the book to his chest. The rest is yours, we're leaving. The 5 Britons gaped as Carl walked off. Glancing at one another, they lunged for the crate, and found treasure. 5 jade-like canisters, each topped with a different animal carving, obviously priceless. They each grabbed one and fled. Just as Carl finally laid hands on the coveted Book of the Dead. Below them Evelyn, O'Connell and Jonathan heard the violent rumble overhead. Sand began to shower down. O'Connell shoved Evelyn and Jonathan clear. Thus, by fate, the Pharaoh's guard descendant O'Connell and the reincarnated Pharaoh's daughter Evelyn discovered High Priest Imhotep's sarcophagus. At the moment they had no idea what the mummy that had endured the scarab beetle torture meant, they were simply elated their expedition had finally yielded results. Meanwhile, driven by greed, the warden became food for the scarab beetles. After a day of digging, darkness fell quickly. In the night, both sides that had each reaped rewards were delighted. Evelyn, especially, she, a bookworm who had spent her life in museums, was thrilled to see such a miraculous mummy. She remained giddy until she stepped into Carl's tent and saw the Book of the Dead being cradled by Soot. This is the Book of the Dead. You actually found it. Evelyn was stunned, a fierce curiosity rising inside her she could hardly suppress. A legendary scripture thought to exist only in tales, unearthed for real. For an Egyptologist, the temptation was irresistible. Yes. Carl answered, sipping tea as though it were nothing special. Looks just like the descriptions. Only pity is we can't open it, seems to be missing a key. A key. Evelyn's eyes locked on the book, her body trembled at the sigil embossed on its cover. Had O'Connell been there he'd have sensed something amiss, but the ever-naive Evelyn noticed nothing, merely felt a sudden urge. No matter. Once we're back, anyone can pry it open. Ancient Egyptian mechanisms are nothing beside modern ones. Let's hope tomorrow's hunt for the Book of the Sun goes as smoothly. If we found the Book of the Dead, the Sun text should surface just as easily. Carl spoke on, but Evelyn couldn't stop herself from stepping closer. Mr. Lance, what if I already have the key? Carl feigned surprise, then looked as though a light had dawned. You have it. No wonder. Name your price, Miss Evelyn. Evelyn pondered, then spoke. Mr. Lance, I'm not trying to claim the book. I only ask to take part in studying both scriptures, if possible. No problem, you're in. Carl's reply was instant. Evelyn's excitement soared. Thank you so much. Please wait, I'll fetch the key. No need. Since you're so keen, you can take the book tonight and return it with the key tomorrow morning. Really? Evelyn's eyes went wide in disbelief. Of course. Soot, hand the book to Miss Evelyn. Okay, Papa. The Book of the Dead was almost too big for Soot, she hugged it with both arms. Only when the ancient tome rested in her own hands did Evelyn believe she truly possessed the legendary scripture. She was so thrilled she couldn't speak. All right, Miss Evelyn, calm yourself. Just bring the book and the key to me tomorrow. Oh, and a word of caution, the Book of the Dead holds uncanny power. Under no circumstances utter the spells written inside. Understood. Understood, understood. Thank you, Mr. Lance. I'll leave you in peace. Watching the ecstatic Evelyn hug the book as she left, Carl's gaze turned amused. He doubted she would heed his warning, preparations were necessary. He summoned the crew, ordered them to stay alert, then turned to his daughter. What is it, Papa? Soot caught the concern in her father's eyes. Carl ruffled his little girl's hair. Things might become dangerous. Should I send you back to Mama first? Very dangerous. Carl considered. A terrifying mummy will rise, and swarms of disgusting beetles will pour out. Fear flickered across Soot's face, but she shook her head resolutely. Papa will protect me, right? Absolutely, you're my little treasure. Then I'm not afraid. She flung her arms around Carl's neck. Soot felt closer to Carl than to Anck Su Naman. Her mother was always occupied with the rebel army and politics, whereas Carl had been the stay-home father who raised her. Carl, pleased by her choice, grew solemn as something crossed his mind. Soot, my darling, remember these words. What words, Papa? You are my daughter, my firstborn, you were born extraordinary. One day, the fate of this world may rest on your shoulders, but fear not, I shall always be at your side. Soot scrunched her face, not fully grasping everything save the last line. Papa, I'll remember. Good. Now close your eyes, Papa has a gift for you. A gift. Though puzzled by his tone, she thrilled at the word gift. Carl lifted his right hand, rainbow light flared, a portal opened, and the adamantium knife he had brought to this world appeared. As he channeled magic, the entire blade shrank to palm size, he threaded a thin cord through its hilt. All right, open your eyes. Soot's big eyes blinked open to the tiny knife pendant. What's this, Papa? Carl tied the charm round her neck, caressed the blade now imbued with his power, and said. A talisman. In danger, simply draw this knife and I'll sense it and come to you. Really? Of course. But mind you, don't play with it, the edge is razor sharp. Clutching her new trinket, Soot nodded happily. Meanwhile, Evelyn hugged the Book of the Dead to her chest as she hurried to her tent. What's that? O'Connell and Jonathan, busy tending the warden who had become scarab beetle's food, looked up as she entered with the massive black tome. The Book of the Dead. Evelyn's excited answer startled them both. Didn't you say that book was only a legend? So I believed, until Mr. Lance found it. In exchange, he's letting me study it and keep it for the night. Exchange. O'Connell smelled a rat, but Evelyn was already pulling the round box from her pack and fitting its key into the lock. Click. As expected, the Book of the Dead sprang open. At once a foul wind swept through the tent, and everyone seemed to hear distant screams. Yet their curiosity now eclipsed everything. Even O'Connell stared at the pages. Incredible, written entirely in ancient Egyptian. Look, this passage says. Suddenly Evelyn remembered and snapped her mouth shut. What's wrong? Mr. Lance warned me never to read the words aloud. Oh. Jonathan, unconcerned, instinctively pronounced the mysterious phrase his eyes fell upon. Stop. Evelyn and O'Connell shouted together, but too late. Jonathan froze, glanced nervously left and right. Seems nothing happened, we're spooking ourselves. Yet from the darkness beyond the tent, out in the desert, a roar echoed toward them. On the desert night, a roar this loud couldn't go unnoticed. In the Hamunaptra camp every laborer rushed out, staring in terror into the darkness. Out of the black night a dark cloud rolled across the sand. Stop gawking, everyone, form up. Carl's shout snapped them back to their senses. They clustered around him while several workers who'd been ready raised their weapons. Evelyn dashed over with O'Connell and Jonathan. What's happening, Mr. Lance? Carl glanced at Evelyn's empty hands and asked. Where's my book? Ah. With a start Evelyn realized she'd run off in such a rush she'd left the Book of the Dead behind. I'll go get it. O'Connell wasn't about to let her. Carl, cradling Soot, said. Later. The black cloud was already upon them. Only then did they see it wasn't a cloud at all, it was a seething mass of locusts. Fire. Instantly the ring of workers raised flamethrowers, roaring tongues of fire devoured every insect that came near, the crimson blaze lighting the whole camp so brightly Evelyn's group could feel the heat, driving the locusts back. But that alone wouldn't be enough. Break out every repellent we've got. At Carl's order the workers scattered sacks of insect powder around the perimeter. Under the scorching flames the powder spread, forming a barrier the bugs dared not cross. Luckily these were low-flying desert locusts, otherwise it would have been far worse. Carl knew they were locusts because Exodus said so, and because he remembered the plot. Evelyn, recognizing the insects and recalling the glyphs on that uncanny sarcophagus, groaned in dismay. The inscriptions were true, we've raised a wraith. What? Carved on the coffin. Anyone who suffers the scarab-devouring execution and returns will bring Egypt 10 great plagues. This is the first pestilence of insects. We should never have spoken that spell. O'Connell and Jonathan still struggled to accept it. Jonathan especially, he'd been the one to recite the incantation, and he was trembling. Carl's face turned grim, he could feel something stirring beneath the sand. He barked. Flamethrowers cover us. Everyone else, camels, trucks, move out now. Casualties were inevitable once the slow retreat began and countless scarab beetles burst from the black sand. Even trained soldiers break under such terror, let alone these laborers. Chaos erupted. No one noticed Carl and Soot vanish. Evelyn's trio leapt aboard a fleeing lorry and escaped, inside Evelyn's tent. Compared to the screams outside and the droning wings, the tent was eerily quiet. Until a rainbow-hued portal opened and a hand reached in, sweeping the Book of the Dead and its key off the table. Dawn broke. Evelyn's group, having driven all night, reached a nearby city and fled Hamunaptra behind. Exhausted, they checked into an inn. So you really think I brought that monster back? In the hotel room the three sat together. Jonathan, imagining those deaths on his conscience, could hardly bear it. Evelyn wasn't sure. Carl's meddling had kept them from witnessing Imhotep's resurrection. I don't know. Their door burst open and a group stormed in. Startled, O'Connell whipped his gun up. Evelyn and Jonathan stared. Instrode her museum's ever acerbic dean. Half an hour later, the dean explained everything and introduced the Pharaoh's guard leader at his side, Eddie. Evelyn suddenly blurted. You were the ones trying to hijack the boat last night. Eddie's face darkened. We wanted to stop you raising Imhotep. Now it's too late, so I've changed plans. So we really did resurrect that high priest. I should have listened to Mr. Lance, it's my fault. The dean rolled his eyes and gestured. Eddie nodded and marched in 5 captives. O'Connell eyed the bound Britons, each clutching a jar, and asked. What's this about? Eddie kicked them. Tell them what Mr. Lance had you do. Stammering, the 5 recounted opening the chest on Carl's orders. Even the naive Evelyn smelled deceit. What's going on? The dean shot the gullible girl a withering look. Simple, you've been used by Mr. Lance. Used? Why? What use are we? O'Connell demanded. Obvious. The dean unfolded a newspaper and handed it over. On the front page a beautiful woman, bearing a faint resemblance to Soot, smiled beneath the name, Anck Sunaman. In that instant understanding struck, and Evelyn gasped. Anck Sunaman, so she's the lover of the high priest Imhotep we resurrected. Reincarnation, to be exact. The dean elaborated. We Guardians have long known this formidable woman appearing in Egypt these past years as Anck Sunaman reborn. Sadly her power is now so great we can't get near. Evidence suggests that as the reincarnation she retains memories of High Priest Imhotep, and she is currently Mrs. Carl Lance. O'Connell caught on at once, his face grave. So he believes in magic, hunted the Book of the Sun and the Book of the Dead, and now wants Imhotep's power for himself. Exactly. And opening either tome needs a key. The key. Evelyn patted her pockets, turned pale. Meanwhile, back in Hamunaptra, Carl reappeared, along with his wife Anck Sunaman and daughter Soot. Early morning, beneath the golden sunlight. Below Hamunaptra's obelisk, Carl, Anck Sunaman, and Soot appeared. Sunlight spilled across the 3 of them. So this is Hamunaptra. Although Anck Sunaman had been very busy, she could still spare this bit of time, and she would soon play a major role. On the very night he obtained the Book of the Dead, Carl had already carried out an in-depth study of this scripture of mysterious ancient Egyptian power. The conclusions did not contradict the results of his years of research into ancient Egyptian mythology and script within the mummy universe. First of all, the so-called Book of the Dead is less a spellbook than a rule book describing the underworld within the ancient Egyptian mythic worldview. It completely records how the netherworld exists and operates, chiefly covering 4 aspects: death, curses, guardianship, and reincarnation. As for incantations, they are only a very small part. Moreover, although it is called black magic, it cannot directly harm others the way the black magic of Harry Potter can. In fact, directly harming others is forbidden within the Book of the Dead. At most it can rely on curses. Just like the curse on the sarcophagi of Imhotep and Anck Sunaman. And even curses carry a price. Take Imhotep. Although the pharaoh's guards inflicted the torture of the home die on him, the price was that after his resurrection he would gain 1,000 years of magical power. Secondly, not just anyone who obtains the Book of the Dead can speak its incantations and wield its power. As mentioned earlier, ancient Egyptian magic places great emphasis on destiny and causality. After studying the Book of the Dead, Carl confirmed this point. And how does ancient Egyptian magic perfectly close the loop of destiny and causality? Through the soul. The body is actually unimportant. Therefore, the 4 powers described in the Book of the Dead, death, curses, guardianship, and reincarnation, seem complex, but in the end they relate to only one thing: the soul. The gods of ancient Egypt control everyone's fate by controlling the soul. And Karl clearly is not within this chain of destiny. Meaning that even though he now possesses the Book of the Dead and can read its incantations, he still cannot use its power, but Anck Su Naman is different. She is originally a link within the fate of the mummy world. Yes, now is a good opportunity. Imhotep has left here to complete the curse and achieve full resurrection. Next, I will devote all my effort to finding the Book of the Sun. If I succeed, I'll need you to try using the incantations of both the Book of the Sun and the Book of the Dead to grant me the power to wield ancient Egyptian magic. Indeed, this was the method Karl discovered after researching the Book of the Dead to gain ancient Egyptian magic for himself. Although he could not use the Book of the Dead, Anck Su Naman could. It might not succeed, but it was worth a try, understood. Anck Su Naman nodded earnestly. Then she looked at her daughter and said nothing. She understood that once the man before her obtained what he wanted, it would be time to leave. Karl paid no heed. All his attention was now on finding the Book of the Sun. In that instant, under the astonished gazes of Anck Su Naman and Soot, Karl's body erupted with brilliant multicolored light. A vast torrent of rainbow energy surged out of him, soared into the sky, then cascaded down like a waterfall, flowed along the statue of sun god Ra, and entered the earth beneath their feet. In a city hotel room. Realizing she had been used, Evelyn's face was full of fury. No one likes being deceived, least of all by someone she once idolized. What do we do now? Go stop him. Evelyn shouted angrily. The dean shook his head. There's no time. What do you mean, there's no time? O'Connell sensed something was wrong. Exactly what it sounds like. The dean's attitude toward O'Connell wasn't friendly. After all, they had guarded the pharaoh's tombs for so many years. None of this trouble would have started if not for O'Connell. You think Mr. Lance had them open the chest containing the Book of the Dead just to use them to lure Imhotep away from Hamunaptra, explained Eddie beside them. To fully resurrect, Imhotep must complete the curse, which means. Eddie didn't finish. Jonathan beside him swallowed hard and spoke. He'll definitely come for them. If that's the case, why keep them here? Eddie grabbed Jonathan by the collar. We have no choice. If Imhotep truly resurrects, with his power no one will be able to stop him. The world will be destroyed. Jonathan was stunned stiff. Just then, a scream came from outside. Panicking, everyone opened the window and saw a red, blood-colored cloud drifting across the sky. Balls of flame rained down, throwing the whole city into chaos and injuring countless people. It's the blood plague and fire from the 10 plagues. He's here. At that moment, everyone understood. Their expressions turned frantic. Eddie reacted quickly. Men, protect them, lock them up separately. No one is allowed near. The rest follow me to save people. How do we stop him? O'Connell asked. Cats. Cats. The unexpected answer left Evelyn and the other two puzzled. The dean said bluntly. Use your head, miss, aren't you a scholar of ancient Egypt? Did you forget that cats are the incarnation of the god of death, Anubis? As long as Imhotep hasn't fully resurrected, cats can scare him away. That's simple. Feeling hopeless against the terrifying resurrected monster, the three finally breathed a sigh of relief. Yet what they didn't know was that, just as they went out to rescue people, a shifty, rat-faced figure slowly poked his head out of one of the hotel rooms. While the protagonists were fending off the attacking Imhotep. Hamunaptra. With the help of dimensional magic, Karl easily reached the lowest level of the temple. As the mechanism beneath the statue of sun god Ra opened, a chest appeared in Karl's sight. Unlike the chest containing the Book of the Dead, which bore a curse, this chest looked simple, nothing on it at all, but when opened, it revealed a dazzling golden scripture. The Book of the Sun. At this moment, the two most precious holy books of the mummy world both belonged to Karl. Next would be the moment to test his idea. Thanks for watching.